Grand Roll Down, Book 10, Chapter 1, by Makoto Sanda, cast by Our Tale Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening. It was my second time on this train, and it felt just as strange as it had before. I could hear the turning of the wheels and the steam escaping from valves. The cabin also rocked comfortably. However, I felt as if I was atop a floating carpet. It didn't make any sense, but these contradictions coexisted aboard this train. The Rail Zeppelin. What a beautiful yet terrifying name, fitting for a secretive train meant for illegal organ trade. Are the interior decorations different?
We redecorate once in a while. His pallid face remained emotionless, making him seem inhuman. His appearance made him well-suited to be the conductor of such a unique train. However, not many guests notice. Out of the ones who frequent the train, most partake in the auctions through their familiars. Only a few board the train in person more than once.
Oh, really? I could sense a feeling of familiarity in his words. Maybe that was because of his Stavmender spirit. Either way, the conductor was just as distant from the normal world as the train itself. Apparently, he was a dead apostle's kinsman. Though dead apostles were also associated with mystery, they were different from mages and heroic spirits. They were also unlike the spirits and ghosts I had been taught to fight, so I found them unbelievable rather than scary. Perhaps this was a sign of how impactful Dr. Heartless's plan was. After much speculation and thought, my mentor had deduced that turning Iskandar into a divine spirit was Heartless's final goal. To this end, he had stolen my mentor's artifact, stolen Mystic Eyes from the Rail Zeppelin, and summoned Faker. All of the scheming he had conducted in the dark was in preparation for this final act. Through creating Divine Spirit Iskandar, Heartless planned to bring back the Age of the Gods, making modern mages lose the reason to search for the root. That was why he had gone into Spirit too, Melbian. I understood the reasoning. Overwhelmed, however, the scale of it all was beyond my imagination. Even though I still didn't understand what Heartless' motivation was, his actions had the power to overturn millennia of Mage's effort. In response, we had gathered a somewhat strange group of people to stop Heartless. Our team was both a result of my mentor's journey and of Heartless' actions. Of course, both of these journeys were incredibly long. My mentor had been involved in countless incidents since he was forcibly made a lord, while Heartless might have started plotting even before he left his post as the head of the Department of Modern Magecraft. The two of them were like mirror images. No, it was more like one was the distorted version of another, like the two sides of a Mobius strip. The likeness was present both in their skill as mages and their ways of thought. Though they couldn't be more different, I couldn't help but think that they approached problems the same way. I was abruptly plunged into fear by a thought. What if my mentor was dragged into the depths of purgatory along with Heartless?
Be reassuring. It'll be all right.
Hopeful. It was my mentor, who was sitting beside me. Even though his hand also trembled slightly, I found comfort in it.
Complaining. Why can't I see anything from the window?
It was Cherubusei ha Tokitu. He was a monk of the Shugendo religion from the Far East. I had learned during my mentor's lectures that it was a complicated combination of Buddhism and mountain worship, but I didn't remember the details.
Why? Do you want to know what's going on outside? This train travels outside of regular reality. This is spirit to Malbion.
The person who responded was the astrologer Flu, a buff man with a dirty headscarf who was currently juggling his knives. Even though we were all inside the train, he reminded me of a gust of dry, desert wind.
Warning, if we accidentally take in more sensory information than our brains can handle, they'll fall to bits. We'll be entering a top danger zone soon, so why would you take the risk?
But shouldn't this degree of chaos be exactly what we mages seek? If one wishes to reach the root, one must not mind risks like these.
Sagan and Fluger already had varying worldviews, making the team feel patched together. The addition of this young lady only made it worse. Even I could tell at a glance that her blue dress was her expensive as it swished about gracefully. Her face looked as if it had been created by a heavenly sculptor. She was so different from everyone else, to the point where I felt that anyone would accept that she was actually a mage. Her name was Unveiled Edelfelt. All three of these people had been present in the first incident Hadra, the Castle of Separation. Now they had joined us on an expedition to Spirit Tomb Albion.
I don't expect a high-class lady to have the same opinions as a spellcaster mercenary anyway. That aside, what roles do you plan on assigning us?
Well, I'm undoubtedly the lookout. I can't do anything else. Unfortunately, I am the worst among us in terms of capability in dealing with mystery.
Adrien, yes. You'd come out on top if this was a Magicraft theory test. For this task, though, your disciple is definitely the most skilled.
I had heard that most teams that went on expeditions to Spirit Tomb Albion were composed of 5 people. There were typically 3 roles. The excavators dug out the resources that they discovered, the lookout warned the team of dangers nearby, and the fighters defended the team against the creatures of the labyrinth.
Analytical, we don't need excavators, but guides. Other than that, the fighters have to sort out what specific role they feel. I'm automatically guide, because I'm the only one with experience surviving in the labyrinth, and Luvia's clearly a fighter.
I never knew you were a survivor of Spirit Tomb Albion.
I also found that interesting. I didn't recall hearing something like it back at Adra Castle.
Joking. That's probably because I put an ad up on TV about it.
No, seriously. Shouldn't the fact that you are a survivor of Spirit Tomb Albion improve your job prospects as a mercenary? Why don't you use it to promote yourself?
Flu was silent for a moment before he spoke again.
Tutto somber, you know my nickname, right?
Seeing realization the answer to that question slipped from my mouth by accident. The Mentor Killer. I didn't know the reason behind the nickname, but I had heard people address him as that during the first incident.
Ersain, it's exactly what you think it means. You stayed in Spiritum Albiano while the incident cooled down. If I advertise myself as a survivor, I'll be held accountable. That's why I've stayed silent.
Understanding. I see.
To Mage's teacher-student relations were incredibly important. If the teacher and the student were related, one could pass on their magic crest to the other. Even if they were not, they were still incredibly close, because the student inherited the teacher's treasured mystery. This was a fact that I had become acutely aware of because of my experiences. I suddenly had a somewhat odd thought. What if mages were like the continuous thread of time? That would explain why killing students or teachers was so frowned down upon. Doing so would be like splitting apart an ancient river of time. The act of erasing of the past teacher, or the future student, was antithetical to a mage's existence. Of course, in some mages' eyes, this heinous act was nothing compared to their ultimate goal of reaching the root. I had met enough mages, so it wasn't actually hard to imagine what I just mentioned. The same went for the mages that were currently gathered on this train. Mysterious after a little while, the train began to slow down. Blue light also began to stream in from the previously pitch-black windows. However, it was different from the sunlight of the surface world. It was a strange light, which filled me with nostalgia and excitement.
We have arrived. We are currently situated in the top floor of Spirit Tomb Albion. Unfortunately, this is as far as this train can safely go.
Observant, I thought I sensed a slight tinge of emotion in his voice, but maybe that was a figment of my imagination. Optimist Rodin bowed as the doors of the train slowly slid open.
Formal ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all the best of luck.
We got off the train at the underground equivalent of the foot of a mountain. Not long after, the rail zeppelin departed, disappearing in a veil of fog. Perhaps because the fog came with the train, it soon dissipated too, leaving us with a full view of Spirit Tomb Albion. That's not the sky, is it? I was struck that was the first thing I said. I was referring to the faintly glowing dome that stretched out far above us. Was the dome several kilometers wide, or several hundreds of kilometers wide? I didn't know. It was the first time I had seen a dome that was so giant, possibly because such a thing did not exist anywhere else. In contrast to the sky, the ground that encircled us was made up of rivers and strange-looking streets, which snaked between several mountain ranges. Was this the mining city? I thought. I had heard Flu talk about it as we made our way here on the train. It was a bridgehead built by mages for those who wanted to challenge the deeper levels of the labyrinth. Gazing upon it from afar, who could believe that such a place existed kilometres beneath the city of London?
He satisfied but groaned at last. Yep, this is the place. As expected of the famous rail Zeppelin, it took us to just the right place.
Did you tell them where to take us, Mr. Flu?
Casual, yes. Though it is the famous rail Zeppelin, it can take us directly to the center of the city. Time is of the essence, so I prepared some supplies before we got on the train. Before we head off, just so you're all aware, it'll take approximately 22 hours and 50 minutes to reach our target floor. We've all rested up as much as possible while you were on the rail Zeppelin, but are you guys sure that you won't need to sleep or relieve yourselves in the process?
Confident being able to go without sleep or food for tiny state is the bare minimum requirement for us. Mox,
Disdainful? Well, of course. That is only the most basic form of enhancement.
I'll be fine as well. Though I wasn't a proper mage, adjusting bodily functions was part of my training as a gravekeeper of Blackmore Graveyard. I also recall the executors of the Holy Church using this tactic, so it was probably a basic requirement for people involved with mystery.
Pained. I'm extremely sorry, but I don't think I can operate without sleep. I've been overexerting my brain for the past day. I'll probably be able to walk without any problems with the help of some kind of stimulant, but it would be very hard for me to maintain a normal mental state.
Understanding. Okay, that's quite the honest confession coming from a Lord of the Clock Tower. It's dangerous to traverse Spirit Tomb Albion without taking breaks anyway. In that case, let's take 2 or 3 breaks, each around 20 minutes in length. Is that better?
Yes, meditation-style healing magecraft can also increase the effectiveness of the rests. There are side effects to using it, but they're within an acceptable range.
Seeing my mentor say this with a frown, a giggle escaped from Luvia, and she covered her mouth.
How plagued must you be by sleep deprivation on a daily basis if that is enough to cause side effects?
Weary, I am constantly plagued by sleep deprivation, lady. Please don't mock me too much, though. It reminds me of my sister.
Consider it payback for earlier. I never expected that I would end up as your teammate.
I shared her sentiment. I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had all gone since the incident at Adra, the castle of separation. We had just rode the rail Zeppelin to Spirit Tomb Albion to chase after a mage from the Age of the Gods and her master, the former head of the Department of Modern Magecraft. That summary alone was probably enough to make some people feel dizzy.
Commanding, put this on.
What? You want me to wear this dirty rag?
I know yet. Oh, give me a break. Are you planning on going to the mining city dressed as a noble? The same goes for you, Lord. No one will mind a monk, but you two stand out too much.
It took Luvia a while to process Flu's words. Finally, she reluctantly covered her beautiful hair and shoulders with the cloth. Though she was a proud, spoiled person, she could accept things that were not in her style, as long as she understood them. She knew that she needed more than powerful magecraft to survive in the world of magecraft. Is it fine if I stay dressed like this?
Casual, yeah, you wear a hooded cape all the time anyway. You'll be fine.
You're just glad to be in the same outfit as everyone else for once, aren't you?
What? Neutral Ad laughed like a creaking machine as I shook my head vehemently. To this, Sagan, the monk who was missing an arm and an eye, cleared his throat.
Flu, should we get going?
Determinaggiore. Come with me.
Flu began to walk forward quickly. The entire group moved forward at an enhanced pace, but my mentor fell behind the group and tripped several times. I actually decided to carry him part of the way when he was out of breath. Despite this, we reached the plains at a surprising speed. In less than 20 minutes we arrived at the beginning of the streets.
Wow!
From a distance, the city reminded me of desert cities in the Middle East. Up close, it was different. To be honest, it looked more like a giant beehive or ant hill. The buildings were not separated with concrete like everywhere else in the modern day, but rather with dirt walls. People walked about in the shadows of these somewhat primitive buildings. The streams of pedestrians were exactly like those on London streets. In a certain sense, the people here were more diverse than the people in the rigid social classes of the clock tower. In terms of similarities, there were few old people, and most were dressed like us. In Stradivkars, the streets were also full of all kinds of strange creatures. Much like the mounted police above the surface, people rode about on rhino-like creatures and giant shelled beasts. I had no idea whether they were phantasmal species or regular animals that had evolved into strange beings over time. Either way, there were all kinds of creatures here that could not be found elsewhere. So this is the mining city. Are these creatures commonplace here?
Informative, every region is different. In the central area, for example, you two will stand out even though you're in a different outfit. You'll probably be fine in this place, though.
Booths and stalls lined the streets as well, selling a variety of items including but not limited to food. Perhaps because of the diverse nature of this place, there was an enigmatic mixture of scents, comprised of strange spices, barbecued food, and the stench of mystical creatures. I thought I smelled some kind of spice that I didn't recognize. The ones on sale here probably had all kinds of special effects that I knew nothing about. Maybe they sold talismans that I knew of. Like spirit roots, here as well. Suddenly, I heard the shouting from one of the booths nearby. Some kind of fight seemed to have broken out. I immediately felt a ripple of magical energy, so someone, actually probably both sides, had probably used enhancement magecraft. Dust was kicked up into the air and fell to the ground, crackling with purple energy. This seemed to be a normal occurrence for the people there, so everyone else just walked by without caring.
Don't look around too much. We are considered newcomers, so we should not mind others' business. I have already sensed 3 people take note of us.
Haha, you're already used to it, huh?
Proud I might not have been to Albion before, but I have visited many foreign countries. No matter where the Edelfelts are, glory must accompany us.
Yeah, you know, if only money could solve all your problems. The thieves here are more concerned with stealing blood and guts.
ショクだ。I know Mage will send it away. But guts.
Now that Flu said it, I could see livers and kidneys on display at the back of some booths, just like how the rail Zeppelins specialized in the trade of mystic eyes. It appeared that the people in Albion specialized in selling internal organs. The buildings here are made of dirt. Is that because...
You realize that? You have a keen eye for spells. Then, let me show you an example.
Mysterious Fluger touched the wall beside him and closed one of his eyes. Then, he gave it a knock before grabbing one of the small knives he usually used for divination and stabbing it into the wall. However, it was not Flu's strange behavior that surprised us. The gash created by his knife closed up right in front of our eyes. What?
Impressed, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? It's like the fang. In Chinese mythology, any minor injuries heal immediately.
Informative. Flu shrugged as I stayed silent, still too surprised to say anything. This is only the uppermost layer, but it's already Albion proper. Specifically, it's the tail of the dragon. Even the dirt has been altered because of the ancient dragon's energy, which is particularly evident around here. Most of the buildings are made by using magecraft to manipulate the properties of the dirt. Flu's explanation did not make it any less surprising. This was completely at odds with what I had been told about magecraft and mystery. But isn't magecraft badly suited to mass production?
Analytical, that only applies on the surface. This place is different. The material makes the houses less durable, but it's not like the people here could have brought down construction equipment. Just like Flu said, there is an excess of mana here. Even though it is still dimensions behind the levels of the age of the gods, greater magic formulae are easy to cast here. Of course, the mages casting the spells still have to be skilled.
He frowned as he said this. No matter what the situation was like, my mentor was still my mentor.
That aside, there are probably more skilled spellcasters here than there are in the clock tower.
informative in summary. There are also compositive workshops on sale here, which are also unique to the area. The environment around the city is constantly shifting, so the people here use tools like formal craft and artificial golems to construct artificial streets.
I listened to Flu, slightly bewildered. Above ground, some people in the first apartment used golems as servants. However, none of them were capable of things on the scale of building houses. This place was really a separate reality. Spirit Tomb Albion surprised me even though I was a member of the clock tower who had experienced a fair share of mystery. In that case, I thought, what was it like for heartless students to have lived here? Miss Jer, Ashara, who we had met at the secret autopsy division, had probably been born in Albion. People who grew up in this wonderland must have had trouble accepting that there was another world above them, as if they had been displaced in time. Just like what Faker must have felt upon being summoned to the modern age.
Either way, every nook and cranny of this place is based upon the labyrinth. That is to say, the body of the nameless ancient dragon. This city only survives on scavenging through its rotten corpse, tearing away what remains of its flesh, and feeding upon the maggots that spew forth from its bones.
Amused. How delightful.
The Adelphelt were often called the world's most elegant hyenas. She was probably capable of saying something like stealing from corpses is a noble's pursuit in a dignified manner.
Well then, Flu, where do you plan on taking us before we head into the labyrinth?
In response to Sagan's question, a frown formed between Flu's eyebrows.
Dos somber to my mentor's place.
Flu led us away from the city, to a place that truly resembled tunnels dug by ants. This area seemed to be part of the labyrinth, with its sparsely populated, winding streets. As I thought about this, I ran after the astrologer.
Didn't you say you killed your mentor?
Oh.
A mysterious then, he carefully took out one of his small knives and tossed it into the air.
Commanding, lead me.
It was a one-count spell. Could the astrologer's knives function the same way underground? I wondered. The blade of the knife traced an invisible arc in the air. It seemed to stop unnaturally as it flew before stabbing into one of the walls beside us. I thought that the wall would heal itself again. This time, however, it passed straight through the wall and fell to the ground on the other side. The place where the wall should have been disappeared, revealing a small path.
I sono jedrej trained to trick me, as bothersome as ever.
You mean your mentor, who is supposed to be dead?
Just as Luvia was about to ask him in more detail, an unfamiliar, raspy voice rang out.
Trying to kill me again, bastard disciple?
An expression of distaste flashed across Flu's face as he turned the corner on the small path. Then he lifted up a sheet that had been draped there to reveal a small space. There were vaguely Middle Eastern decorations on the walls and cupboards, along with some star charts and knives similar to the ones Flu used. The person who the raspy voice belonged to was sitting right in the center of the room. It was a short old man who sat cross-legged on a carpet. It was impossible to tell his exact age, but I judged that he was more than 70 years old. He didn't have a single hair atop his head, and his teeth were yellow and uneven. However, instead of emitting some kind of stench, he smelled strangely sweet, like perfume. There was a jar of water next to him, and the old man reached out to pick up the hose that was attached to it. He had probably been smoking a hookah alone before we interrupted him. The strange smell was probably also a result of it.
So, you're back, stupid disciple, and you've brought guests. Call me Jareth. I've given up on everything but...
So, Flu didn't kill you?
Yes, he did. As a mage, I'm completely dead. My magic circuits are all in shambles. My abilities now are worse than those of a count-rank child.
Complaining. It seems you as dismissive of your health as usual.
That's what you take issue with. That doesn't sound like something a mentor...
Not yet, as you can tell. My mentor is very good at getting people to hate him. If he wasn't technically dead, the line of people waiting to take a stab at him will be longer than the ones in amusement parks.
The old man, who should have been dead, took another drag on his hookah and smiled. Seeing this, Flu sighed.
That's why I killed him as That's why I killed him as if he was dead. Then, after I inherited his workshop, I went knocking on the gates of Albion with him.
The guards of Spirit Tomb Albion are generally very strict, but they don't care much when you enter. In the early days, survivors would come here to train, so there aren't many restrictions.
Viari. Yes, like I said back on the train, I hid in Albion until the situation cooled down.
I thought back then that an old withered tree like me would get to blossom again.
Uto complaining. There are so many people out there who hate me for killing you before they could.
And that's why you're a spellcaster and not a mage. What are you trying to do with this team of people? Excavation is hardly as profitable as it used to be. Isn't that right, little Miss Edelfelt and young Lord of the El-Melloi?
For someone living in Spirit Tomb Albion, you seem to be quite knowledgeable about the world above.
My magic circuits might not work anymore, but I'm still a spellcaster at heart. Working hard in unconventional areas is the spellcaster way. Gathering information is one such area. I still don't know why you're here, though. Especially not why my stupid disciple is with you. I know lots of people hate me. I think the Edelfelt hyenas are above stealing from an old man like me, right?
Giraffe, mentor. You want to reach the ancient heart in 23 hours. No, we only have 22 left.
Huh? What? Has your time on the surface made you crazy? If you've got a curse on your brain, I can do you a favor and introduce you to an old friend of mine from the Department of Curses.
Insistente. You remember you saying once that way to descend, you said that regular teams don't need to go beyond the 100th floor because they have no way of getting back. But there are plenty of ways to get down there.
I probably said that when I was drunk or...
The old man moved the hookah over and took another drag on it. He lazily twirled his finger about in the smoke, seeming to not care about his disciple's request. My mentor walked up to the old man.
Tomorrow, a grand roll will be held in the ancient heart.
Yes. It's a meeting of the ridiculous folk who think they found gold when they haven't even seen glitter, isn't it? I don't care what they do to themselves or the world. I don't care what depths they fall to. I don't care about what your modern magecraft is. I don't mind being stuck in Spirit Tomb Albion as long as I don't have to witness this madness.
Proud. In that case, I think this will satisfy you.
Luvia interjected, proudly stepping forward. She had thrust an expensive-looking jewel necklace at the old man. She probably brought it along because she reasoned it would be useful in Albion as well. The old man gingerly picked up the necklace and examined it for a few moments before handing it back.
Dismissive, all right, but will anyone buy something like this down here? You Edelfelt should really reflect on your habit of obsessing over catalysts.
Sir? My mentor was bowing. His long hair hung from his ears, like the feathers of a damp raven, concealing his expression.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry, I have nothing to give you in return. I have things that cannot be traded for with money. I'm sure you do as well. But I can't just come here out of the blue to ruin your pride. So this is all I can do.
Skeptical, has anyone ever told you?
Humble, yes. I've been scolded many times, including by people who I respect. I know I'm not worthy of being a lord. This foolish solution is the only one I can think of.
Instead of wasting time bowing to an old man like me, why don't you try breaking into the labyrinth?
Firm Flu brought me here. I haven't known him for long, but I trust him, and he judges that your assistance is necessary.
The old man was silent for a moment. He let go of the hose of the hookah and stared intently at my mentor.
You've got a keen eye.
The old man ignored the echoed question and continued. A lord, huh? A lord of the clock tower bowed to me. I didn't know why, but instead of floating upwards like smoke, the old man's words sank to the ground.
Oi, disciple. There is a way to go down from the great magic circuit. I never said you'll be in one piece when you get there, though. You know that, right?
Determined, you've got a job to do. You have no choice.
Flu's almost mindless response made the old man frown.
Well, you say? Well, you've certainly sold your life for a low price.
Impatient, now's not the time for this. Every second we spend here is a precious second wasted.
Says the ones who barged into my house.
Is what we have now enough, Mr. Gareth?
Fine, I'll check. Since you came to find me, you've brought it with you.
Hesitant if you're asking for that thing that I had with me last time.
The old man grabbed the bag that Flew handed him and inspected its contents. It's so old. Then he slowly stood up and made an announcement after giving his disciple a chittering explanation.
ホーファナオリングンフルセイだと we only have 小さい合わせだ
If you wait half an hour, you'll save half a day. You better thank me with tears in your eyes the next.
Decisive with that, the old man who called himself Gareth tossed the cloth at the doorway behind him and walked calmly away.
Worried tomorrow was probably going to be the longest day of my life. Lord El-Melloi II, firmly believed in this. It wasn't just because of the impending grand role. My brother had also just gone into Albion in pursuit of Heartless. It was then that I suddenly realized I was playing with a chess piece. It was so childish of me to liken the world to a chessboard. Even though mages kind of viewed the world as one, most people gave up on their delusions of becoming superheroes at a young age. Mages were just sad fools who refused to let go of the delusions they had unknowingly caught hold of. I was one of this group of people beyond salvation. Every human life is equally stupid. It didn't matter if we had only caught hold of fragments. It was more interesting this way. Scheming to make others fall, falling to others' schemes, meaninglessly chasing after the root, and rolling about in pain and shame. This was the life I wanted to live. I never once wished for a complete, fulfilling life. I'd rather have my heart removed than to have that imposed on me. Anxious, I was only thinking about this because I was alone for the first time in a while. Though my brother often went on business trips beyond London, I had never seriously considered the possibility that he might never come back. As a collateral, I had taken away his magic crest a long time ago, but I knew he didn't really care about it. However, this was undoubtedly an exception. Up until this point, we had experienced all sorts of incidents, but none of them could compare to the arcane depths of Spirit Tomb Albion. In a certain sense, it was quite close to us mages, as it was physically hidden beneath our feet. However, I could not grasp the full extent of its fearsomeness. I couldn't help but wonder how many mages had entered, never to return. I knew there wasn't a better way to chase after Heartless, but Spirit Tomb Albion was still too risky for comfort. Some people would probably start yelling at me until my head burst open if I told them of our plan. Stressed, I had already lost most of my cards. That was why I kept staring at all the documents I had as the night wore on. It seemed that my brother would not make it to the grand roll. Even if we had some method of communication, it would still be harder for me if he was not there. My mentor probably wasn't aware of the true impact of a title like Lord El-Melloi II, who has a great influence on the new age. The Department of Modern Magecraft was in a disadvantageous position to begin with. Now we had just lost so many cards right before the game was to begin. Our unpreparedness was almost laughable. Scheming, the biggest question of this grand roll was whether or not someone there was our enemy. Is it too late to surrender to the Democratic faction? I wondered. I can't believe I actually seriously considered that option for a moment. It was impossible. Switching factions right now would seriously harm the reputation of the largest faction in the clock tower, which was headed by the Bartholomew. Doing so would completely wreck the El-Melloi faction. If we took one wrong step, maybe we would be completely wiped from the history of the clock tower. Simply saying c'est la vie and giving up was like asking to be humiliated. Some other faction would immediately take up the opportunity and grind us into pieces. The clock tower's power struggles were not kind. Simple things. Every player of the game must continually establish their existence in order to survive. After a while, I felt my stomach ache worsen. It was my brother's fault.
Just as I was about to lean back on my desk chair, a voice came from behind the sofa beside me.
Bash, what's happened so far? Have they already gotten to Albion? I think they're there. I used the strongest communication magecraft I can cast, but the connection's still cut off. If they reach the deeper layers, I have no way of knowing they're up to.
Bryn, excited I want to ride the rail Zeppelin too, even though there isn't an auction this time. I really want to buy all those mystic eye thingies. For the money, I'll just have to go on Van Fam's boat again.
If you want money, why don't you do me a favor and sell your vocal cords?
Being mute would be annoying, so I should probably get started preparing new ones. But if I'm going to make new ones, why should I stop at my vocal cords? What if I just remove my right arm? An arm that can shapeshifter and talk would be so cool, don't you think?
I said, looking away from the stupid genius who was now excitedly examining his own arm. Usually, it was my brother's job to deal with him. If he was here, this interaction would be much more interesting. I pressed the area between my eyebrows in an attempt to focus. Of course, I could also achieve this by using enhancement, but I wanted to conserve as much magical energy as possible so I didn't die of nervousness during the grand roll. Speaking of which, I was also drinking iced tea. I was glad to have this honor student around. How are things on your side?
No, it isn't.
Observant, of course, Flat was also running around to assist in this. The twin jewels of the El-Melloi classroom were surprisingly well loved. Even Flat seemed to radiate a feeling that made people want to help. This was my weakness, so I couldn't help but feel a little jealous. I'm only Melvin had prepared the rail Zeppelin, but I had gathered all the members of the team. If I had anyone else that could get things done on my side, I wouldn't have had to find my brother.
By determined, I promise to protect you.
Do you think I'll let you?
The teenager snapped his fingers, bored again. I took a sip of warm tea before I explained my outburst.
It isn't actually dangerous to go to a grand roll. If someone managed to sneak in, they could topple the balance of the entire clock tower. Also, like Mr. Jourdan said, you two are in charge of everything up here while the meeting goes on.
Boast and leave it to me. I'm as trustworthy as the Titanic. All the glaciers and stuff will go ka-ching and fall to pieces.
What world's Titanic is that? As I snapped at Flat, I considered another unsettling variable. What was Melvin doing right now? I thought. I knew he communicated with the Trembellio faction after preparing the Rail Zeppelin, but I didn't know where he went after that. Did the Democratic faction get a hold of him? That was very likely. After all, Melvin was a member of the Trembellio family, which was at the center of the Democratic faction. It was atypical for someone of his standing to help us, as we were still technically part of the aristocratic faction. Although saying that, Melvin was still Melvin. Considering how he valued entertainment more than his own life, he probably wouldn't give in to power that easily. Also, he might not look like it, but that guy was the public face of the Wines family. He wouldn't be killed that easily. That meant the memory of the head of the Trembellios flashed across my mind. Of course, if Lord Trembellio made a move, Melvin could be easily locked up. Though the El-Melloi faction was allied with them for the moment, he probably viewed us as a stain to be removed. In terms of the other Lord Representative, Olgamari, I didn't believe that the Department of Astromancy would save us. Our connection was barely existent, so I didn't expect much from her. Goodness, phrase like, being surrounded on four sides was almost starting to sound cute. As I thought of this reference to Eastern history, I tried to stop myself from smiling. The most troubling part of this was that I actually felt quite happy. If I was in a position more suited to my personality, maybe I would become a tyrant. Please don't tell me that I'm already a tyrant. Give me a break.
Neutral!
It appeared that she had received some kind of call from the reception area of the school building. Without giving me time to think, the words that I dreaded the most left her mercury lips.
Formal? The car from the Secret Autopsy Division has arrived. The Secret Autopsy Division? The Secret Autopsy Division?
Formal? Yes, the grand roll will be held tomorrow, so it is time for the attendees to head to Spirit Tomb Albion.
My frown deepened. I should probably prepare some kind of magecraft medicine so I didn't end up like my brother. Scheming. Typical of them to be impatient. Also typical of the Secret Autopsy Division to not give Lords preferential treatment. I wonder if they'll give me some more time to plan if I ask nicely. Unlike the train that had taken my brother into Albion, the vehicle that awaited me did not allow me to do as I wished. Perhaps someone from the Democratic faction had chosen to take action to avoid muddying the situation. Dash damn it, maybe the meeting itself would be moved forward. I had to concede that these two were undoubtedly worthy of their title when it came to tense moments. Though they were mostly annoying, they made up for it by also being lovable. Of course. Time to head off with all my dignity. Make sure you two see me off with a serious expression.
I drank the rest of my tea in a single gulp. Not long after, Trimmau and I boarded the limousine that waited for us in the darkness. The old man who called himself Giraffe returned after exactly 30 minutes, right when Segan and Luvia began to impatiently suggest that we head off without waiting for him. Giraffe ignored Segan and shrugged. I suddenly realized that he reminded me of his disciple Fluga. It soon dawned on us all that the old man had not gone somewhere random, which proven by the basket that he bore on his back. The old man took us to the foot of a small hill in the wilderness. It wasn't much further away than the place where the rail Zeppelin had dropped us off. However, in place of the lush vegetation from earlier, the ground beneath our feet was full of cracks that resembled dragon scales. Maybe I was being over-imaginative, but it looked like the dead dragon's tail. Since I couldn't confirm this suspicion, I decided to just pretend it was regular dirt. The dry wind wasn't like the winter gales of the surface. It carried trace amounts of magical energy, exciting my magic circuits like needles, pricking my skin, looking up at the luminous dome above us. I couldn't help but swallow.
Same.
The monk in question looked toward the hill that the old man pointed at. It was around 20 meters tall, with a summit that stretched out like the head of a giant mammoth. The monk frowned and prepared to jump. Then he extended his arms, leaping upward as if he had suddenly grown 2 giant wings. Though he said it would take 2 strides, he probably stepped on something as he made his way up the hill. He moved too fast for me to see clearly, and he was at the summit before I knew it.
Proud. Yes. It's the only thing that my father couldn't help but pray.
When exploring Albion, get as high up as possible. Shugendo training is very similar to the training you need to survive here. I've been in a team with a monk like you before, and his skills were quite impressive.
Are there monks in Albion as well?
Actual, I guess you could say that Albion has a higher concentration of mages and spellcasters than the surface world. You lost an arm, right? Was that the price for using some kind of magecraft?
Haseta. Something like that.
I looked away, even though I knew I probably shouldn't. I just couldn't meet his eyes because his arm had been torn away by my lance.
Your balance was off when you jumped. You would have used seal magecraft if you still had that arm, right?
うるさいね。Wada, there's no way to get it back. There's no point on dwelling it either. I've already given up on trying to count everything I've lost.
Segan had headed to the Castle of Separation to retrieve what he had lost, taking with him the magic crest that his brother had left behind. As a price for repairing the magic crest, the owner of the castle had taken away his original identity. This ultimately resulted in our fight, which cost him his right arm. For that reason, Segan decided against explaining how he had lost his arm and opted to say that he had given up. Probably so I wouldn't feel as bad. However, his actions made it even harder for me to look up.
Roll up your sleeve. Let me see your arm.
Faced with the unrelenting old man, Segan reluctantly complied. Gareth stared intently at the mass of still regenerating flesh, grabbed a hold of it.
And... Oh... What do you do?
With that succinct response, the old man twisted Saiding's arm and pressed hard on the exact place where it had been severed. Sign let out a cry of misery.
Don't.
As I was about to argue, I saw that my mentor was not looking at Gareth or Segan, but at the place the old man had just pressed down on. From there, a green sprout that glowed faintly grew rapidly from his flesh.
Impressed I never knew spirit roots can be used this way.
Tenga.
Mysterious as if it was urged on by Segan's cries, the seedling quickly covered the cross-section of Segan's arm. Leaves appeared on the winding branches, and then withered as quickly as they came. It was as if the life of a tree had been compressed to a few seconds. Before I had time to process what was happening, the woody branches that remained shifted into the shape of Sagan's arm. Though it resembled a regular tree, it appeared that Sagan could move it freely. He used his normal hand to inspect the new one as he tried contracting and unfolding his fingers.
Spirit roots are meant to be for controlling stone statues so that they can move while keeping their original shapes. It also works for things like this as long as the person whose magic circuits you're attaching it on is compatible with it.
ペンテ。はあ。Where did you get this from?
Sings aren't common on the surface, but there are certain ways to get them down here. It's a good match with your practices, isn't it? It's not exactly the same as your original arm, but you'll get used to it.
After he finished speaking, Gareth turned away as if he had just done, nothing more than handing Sagan a piece of old furniture.
Annoyed? Can you please stop calling me by my family name?
Though Luvia's tone wasn't kind, her voice was missing its usual contempt, possibly because of the events that had just transpired.
Testing, plenty of techniques for using gemstones to automatically.
Confident? Yes, of course, since mages naturally incur resentment.
Luvia was a hunter. That was why they called her the world's most graceful hyena. In her mind, if someone hurt her, double the retribution was far from enough.
Instructive good. It's useful here, but take care not to concentrate too much magical energy in the Great Magic Circuit. Every nook and cranny of this place is overflowing with it. That kind of magecraft alarm will keep going off. It might be less precise, but you probably want to limit its targets.
Targets?
Yes, you should be all set if you constantly adjust the attributes it's looking for.
Before he even finished his sentence, the old man suddenly raised his hand. With a whoosh, an assortment of things flew out of it and onto the wasteland around us. It appeared to be some minerals mined from Albion. Later, I realized that there was a contraption near his wrist that allowed him to toss things into the air, while his hand remained still.
Testing. How many did I just throw, and where did they go?
Smug? Testing me?
Mysterious Luvia took out a blue jewel and uttered an incantation from her lovely lips.
Commanding awaken!
With a single word from her, the gem changed colour from blue to red, and then yellow in the space of a few seconds.
No. There's one hidden behind you. They're in these places.
Luvia flicked the gem. It flew toward the rocks that the old man had thrown, causing them to rise from the ground.
Impressed so annoying? It only took you 20 seconds and a single word? I was expecting maybe 15 minutes. If only my disciples were this talented.
E con Planin, ehi,
Do you have other disciples?
Proud, oh, yes. I'm a spellcaster. I don't need to stick to teaching magecraft one-on-one like proper mages. But apart from this idiot...
Shocked,
It's just some boring stuff about the past.
he handed us a sheet of what looked like regular printer paper. It probably had a protection spell cast on it, but it didn't look like a catalyst or a mystic code. Fluttering in the wind, it looked anything but reliable. However, my mentor gasped when he saw its contents.
This is the latest map of Albion. I asked a friend who's familiar with the underground to tell me the places where monsters have been spotted recently. With this, Flu can guarantee that you can dive to the bottom layers as safely as possible.
tutto. Shocked. Wait, how did you get this?
I'm an old man living at the borders of the mining city who can't even use magecraft well. I've got to have something like this. If you follow the routes on this map, you can keep fights with phantasmal species of the Great Magic Circuit to a minimum.
Disbolating? No, that's not what I meant. This map and the spirit roots, they are not things you can get at a moment's notice. If you asked me to get it back when I was in hiding, it would have taken me a year at least.
I understood. This place was a giant labyrinth, so any map that showed the areas that the monsters here frequented must be worth a hefty sum. But why are you giving us this?
Just like my stupid disciple said, I died a long time ago. Dead people don't need money or possessions. Since I'm not a mage but a spellcaster, I don't have anyone to pass my belongings to. I always planned on letting go of it someday. Now the opportunity to do that has come. Hey, Lord over there! Satisfied your actions have paid off? Not a single person I knew in the past would believe that a Lord of the Clock Tower bowed to me. It's already hard enough to believe that a new Aegir can become a lord.
The old man began to laugh while the mages around me had not yet recovered from their stunned silence. Who could have known that the old man would give away something so valuable?
Grateful, thank you for your praise. If you will allow me one more selfish request, could you please help me pass on a message?
That depends on what the message is.
The old man accepted the note that my mentor handed him. One of his eyebrows rose as he read its contents. Why? I wondered. This was such an interesting turn of events. This old man had only known my mentor for less than an hour. However, if Flügel was right, he was willing to spend his entire savings to help us. Something in their conversation must have moved him deeply. Though I felt something as well, its impact on me was not as deep. The old man took out some tools and handed them to Flü.
Instructive, I made some slight adjustments to the tools that are popular right now. I don't think you'll need me to explain how to use them. Take this as well. I didn't get the chance to give it to you before. It's the knife I once used.
Are you sure you're giving it to me, old man? You wouldn't give it to me no matter how many times I asked before.
I don't have any use for it now. I only kept it because I was too attached to it.
Prefew picked up his tool-filled backpack and tucked the knife into his clothes after a brief inspection.
Godi, gati, thanks.
Dismissive, you don't need to thank me. Oh, it's getting late. You all better get going.
Sincere, life a bit longer, okay?
Really? Are you sure your time on the surface hasn't made you forget about who I am?
The old man smiled, revealing a mouthful of crooked teeth. His laughter reminded me of ads. It was not a nice sound, but it carried an emotion that I could appreciate. As I thought this, I felt a clunk from the box in the bird cage at my right shoulder. I turned to see Flü urging my mentor forward.
Let's go, Lord El-Melloi II.
Hesitant, is it really all right if we do?
Nonchalante well.
Flü began to walk forward without properly answering the question. Luvia and Saigon also followed him after quickly bidding goodbye to the old man. After a while, I heard the distant voice of the old man calling out to us.
Shouting, Flü! Lord El-Melloi II! You don't have to show me your miserable faces again, but make sure you make it back alive.
Hopeful, though he didn't turn back to look, the astrologer raised his arm to tell his mentor that he understood. We followed Flü to a hilly area that still lacked vegetation. Instead, there were a few cracked columns beside us. It looked like a giant stone circle, but it didn't seem to have been built intentionally. Rather, it was like another structure had been weathered and battered until it turned into its current form. The old man continued to watch us like a stone statue on the horizon until he faded from view.
That old man is dead to the world of magecraft. Half of that was his fault, but the other half was mine.
What makes you say that?
You heard him say that all his students were dead, except for me, right?
Pair of disciples. So, they were probably also spellcasters like Flü.
It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't accurate. All of them were actually killed. Explain in Jera Fiver of the Labyrinth. The clock tower above ground is the best place for magecraft research, but Albion is far superior as a place for spellcasters to gain fighting experience. After Giraffe went to the surface, he made a name for himself for being smart and capable. Point of fact, he was an incredibly nosy person who kept taking other lonely, similarly unfortunate mages under his wing. He was one such mage.
As Flü spoke, I could imagine what the old man was once like. I saw him standing under the bright sun of the Middle East, surrounded by a group of young mages. Maybe the El-Melloi classroom had been like that too when my mentor first took over. With Flü at its lead, the team was probably full of vitality as they interacted with different gangs and groups.
He must have done something that upset the clock tower. They believed that mystery must be concealed. He always worked behind the scenes, and he never did anything that explicitly broke the rules of the clock tower. Still, he was a bit too carefree and flamboyant. He had a lot of enemies to begin with, and he only made it worse with running his mouth and other bad habits. In the end, I sort of drifted out of contact with him. He warned him several times that he'd better clean things up before he got noticed, but he never listened.
The final incident happened when Jareth had been commissioned to sneak into a foreign country. His workshop was raided after he involved himself too closely with regional conflicts. Even so, it was difficult to imagine a group of mages getting killed by normal people with guns, no matter how unskilled the mages were. The bounded fields around his workshop should not have been so brittle that a few bullets could shatter it. It was undoubtedly the work of a few spellcasters who hated Gareth. Tragic when Gareth returned, his workshop had been reduced to ruins. The catalysts and talismans he had spent his life collecting had all been robbed from him. Every disciple that he had asked to guard the workshop had been brutally killed, their bodies bearing evidence of torture.
After his disciples died, Jareth was overcome with a desire for revenge. All the people responsible, along with the people who just happened to be there, and the people who instigated the crime, Jareth sought out and killed every single one of them. He was the man who taught me Divina Shen. After all, he's not the sort of man you can hide from. In the 2 years following his disciples' murder, Jareth was like a demon.
It gave me the impression of a shadow. Everyone becomes obsessed with something at some point in their life. But the old man's experiences let such a cloud of darkness hang over him, that he and his shadow could no longer be told apart. After all, you don't need to be afraid anymore if you become the thing you fear.
Sombra, but there always comes a point where Fate catches up with you. Jareth had to pay for his revenge spree. That night, Fate came for him in the form of an assassin.
An assassin?
Explaining the assassin was pretty well known in those circles. He was some hotshot from the east and used some kind of special magecraft to kill mages. I don't know how it worked, but as soon as my mentor was hit by one of his bullets, his magic crest and circuits were trashed.
My mentor suddenly tensed. Maybe he suddenly thought of something. Or maybe Flu was using this story to test him. Regardless, I had no idea what he was thinking. But I don't think I needed to know. If I had, I know he would have told me. I trusted him.
You seem to know quite a lot about that assassin.
Yes, I formed a temporary alliance with him once.
Confused. Wait, didn't you say that you're responsible for his death?
Guilty, like you said. Half of it is my fault. I wasn't close with him at the time. He always thought that I hated the guy. Maybe I did, but you know that my nickname is the Mentor Killer, right? Jareth Sitman was talented, and not just as a mage. He was a crazy strategist that knew his target's blind spots and how to exploit them. Jareth wasn't bad at magecraft, but the assassin never gave him a chance to fight. The bullet went through him, and then it was all over. If I hadn't pretended to finish him off and then hide him in Albion, I doubt Jareth would have been able to survive. There is every chance that the assassin knows he's still kicking, actually. Maybe he only left us alone because the old man's practically no longer a mage.
My mentor was unnaturally silent. Flu continued without regard for his response.
Informative, you heard rumors that the clock tower noble was the one who hired the killers. But because the original hitman subcontracted someone else, it's pretty much impossible to find that noble.
Knowing that makes sense. People of high standing in the clock tower hardly ever commission such tasks themselves.
It was hard to imagine spellcaster mercenaries and mages of noble bloodline in the same room, but murder was one of the things that brought them together. Flu reached out to touch one of the stone columns. His eyes wandered along its cracks.
Reminiscent, there was a time I heard Jareth go off about the clock tower bigwigs, how he couldn't stand them scrambling to take over the world like that. He probably went into Albion out of spite. After he returned to the surface, he acted even tougher than before, probably for the same reason. In his eyes, he was famous and successful, so why did he need to care about what those clock tower bastards think? And so he kept ignoring them, and thinking that way cost him his dear disciples, the workshop he had spent so much time on, and the magic circuits and crest that he was so proud of. He lost everything. Even though he made it down to Albion, I wasn't sure he could keep going. Surely, he wouldn't have any trouble with rough living, but it's not like he had anything left to live for. People don't tend to last long if they're not living for anything.
I think I understood. I had never strived to achieve something with that much determination. My heart had never burned with the desire to prove myself, but if a wish that I held close to my heart was granted, my actions would definitely be restricted by it. That was because the weight of a wish was equal to the weight of a soul. In order to achieve a dream, you must be prepared to live a certain way. In that case, the dreams that you spent your life to achieve are not only your wishes, but also your way of life. With all that said, how was a person whose dreams led to the death of everything he held dear meant to live out the rest of his life?
That's why he was so stunned when a lord bowed down to him. Giraffe's not the only spellcaster out there who scoops an entire career around wanting to prove the clock tower wrong. The difference here is that he achieved his dream. Then, Fate played a cruel trick on him, and the life he created for himself was snatched away. Your actions seem to have reminded him of the dream he once had. Lord El-Melloi II, you bowed to him because you guessed that he was like that, right?
Oh, I blurted out. I finally understood why Flu was telling us all this.
The Spilla de Fee, do you think I'm an evil person for using others' wishes to achieve my own goals?
There were definitely people out there who would condemn him for doing so. It was probably one of the ways my mentor had managed to preserve his position in the clock tower. He wasn't good at scheming or handling delicate interpersonal relationships. However, he was able to see the wide unit hiding inside Mage's hearts. As long as his target's goals were connected to the abyss of magecraft, my mentor's discerning eye could see into the core of their soul. You've got a keen eye. The old man had said this to my mentor not long ago. Was this what he had meant? In response to my mentor's question, Flu smiled. It was different from the self-mocking smile he had earlier.
Sincereno, I don't. Giraffe knows that you're exploiting his wish, but he thanked you anyway. He probably thinks all his hard work has finally been rewarded. In fact, maybe I should thank you.
At this, Flu turned around. The old man's figure had disappeared from view, but I couldn't help but think that his presence was still there, waiting for us at the foot of that hill. I felt emotions that I could not control well up inside me. Mages were supposed to be monsters who sacrificed their humanity to mystery. That statement wasn't false. I had experienced it several times myself. But why did I feel that they were so incredibly human sometimes? After journeying in silence for a while, Flu stopped in his tracks. We had entered a hilly region. Strange rocks were scattered all around us. Some were spherical, some triangular, while others were even star-shaped. They were all stacked in vertical piles which remained stable for a reason I couldn't even guess. Rather than looking like the work of an artist, it was more like a giant child with a wild imagination had moulded these shapes out of clay. Upon closer examination, the rock piles were even stranger. Some stacks seemed to defy gravity, with giant stony tumors and slanting towers. However, all of them stayed in place, causing me to question my sense of balance. Was this absurd sight also the result of the dead dragon's power?
Informative there. Over there's one of many entrances to the main part of the labyrinth. 1 out of the 10 or so groups I was familiar with had their own special entrances. The map Giraffe gave us shows all kinds of useful shortcuts we can take from here.
I'm impressed. 1 out of 10 of the groups you were familiar with, you say? You are part of the 10%. Then how reliable?
Casual. It's all just a result of dumb luck. You know I'm good at divination, right?
Flu reluctantly reached for the small knife at his belt. However, just as he was about to take it out, he changed his mind and switched to another one. The first knife he reached for was the one the old man had just given him.
Commanding lead.
Mysterious, the knife drew an arc as it was tossed through the air. I thought I saw it stop unnaturally for a moment before it went flying towards one of the stone columns. I reckoned that Flu used some kind of illusory magecraft, which he probably learnt from his mentor.
Dubtanta stai fastisso.
The structure of Albion is constantly shifting, isn't it?
Casual, that depends on whether we're lucky or not. Anyway, there's no way we can get to our destination in 20 hours if we don't take a shortcut. Warning, watch your head.
We found ourselves inside a massive cavern.
Determine delece descarto de grete magic circuit.
Mysterious Flu's voice echoed back and forth in the cave as I peered down into the bottomless depths. Light spiraled through the darkness, dancing about like a firefly and flickering like fireworks. This light was unlike typical sunlight, or artificial light, and more akin to the light of an explosive burst. It came from the magical energy surging through the interweaving tunnels, violently repelling each other. Here, magical energy from different sources in the great magic circuit converged. This place looked like an ocean with its coral-covered floor. This wasn't regular coral, of course. Though the corals that thrived in the depths of Albion resembled their surface relatives, they were dyed in mystical colours by the magical energy-rich air. It was all thanks to the long-dead dragon who had tried to tunnel his way to the land of the fairies and had died in the process. Too many things clung to its corpse, eventually forming a labyrinth. The power of the dragon had created a space that preserved the texture of the Age of the Gods, which was supposed to be lost. For this reason, all the creatures and plants that had evolved in Albion were completely different to their counterparts on the surface. It was the only place where magical energy could emit light. Calling it the Mage's Association's most valuable asset would not be exaggeration. Presently, two beings who didn't belong in this section of the labyrinth had snuck in. The source of the cry, though, wasn't necessarily a lion. Unlike most lions, this beast had two heads, the wings of a vulture, and enormous claws that dripped with a viscous poison. This creature existed only in Albion, not even in legends from the surface. Naturally, this beast wasn't one of the foreign intruders in Albion. There were other silhouettes beside the beast. It cried out again, the magical energy in its roar, catching the silhouette's attention. Even a creature native to Albion would probably pass out from the roar and become the two-headed lion's food.
It always makes me sad to see a valiant hunter whose attacks prove futile against a stronger enemy.
The action only seemed slow because it was a logical move. In reality, the weapon traced an arc through the darkness with amazing speed.
A poor Phaistos.
It didn't matter whether or not the beast heard the silhouette softly chant a god's name. It still felt the blade cleave cleanly through its two heads, the power of the blade magnified by the silhouette's invocation of the name of the god of the forge.
Oh, what a wonderful place this labyrinth is. If Callisthenes was here, he'd probably be crying tears of joy. Don't you think it's about time to make a move, modern mage?
No, not yet.
Despite his smile, the mage was far less composed than Faker was used to seeing. That was because he had been continuously supplying Faker with magical energy since they entered Albion with his So far, Faker had used her noble phantasm to defeat many enemies that blocked them. Even though she was a seasoned warrior who knew how to conserve magical energy, she was an extra servant with hardly any support from the Holy Grail. The magical energy Heartless had provided would have been enough to drain several regular mages. Analytical, unlike the situation before on the rail Zeppelin, Dr. Heartless was suppressing the extraordinary fatigue of supporting Faker and fighting all the while as well. Of course he had prepared for this, but he would have collapsed long ago if not for the rich magical energy that naturally existed in Albion.
Impressed, for whatever reason, I feel like I'm getting quite used to this. I thought we would have a much more difficult time.
While it has been a while since I resigned, the title of the head of a department of the clock tower is not a meaningless one.
Neutral with a wry smile, the mage sipped elixir from a flask. Not only was this elixir very expensive, but overusing it could cause one to overly rely upon it. Still, extreme situations called for extreme measures, even if nutritional drinks concocted by modern scientists were safer and more effective in ensuring movement. This elixir was far superior in activating magical energy.
Cadreing, your intuition is impressive. My estimate is about the same as yours.
Proud people with poor intuition are not worthy of following my king's great conquest. Anyone who has lived through that many conquests must at least cultivate a decent sense of it.
I see. After a certain point, intuition is no different to predicting the future.
Neutral Heartless took a deep breath of air so humid he might as well have breathed ocean water. For a time, Faker was quiet. as she walked, her eyes trained up at the darkness of the great magic circuit. But all at once, she broke her silence.
That means that you will kill me in half a day.
Yes.
Resigned, you are using me as a catalyst to summon Divine Spirit Iskandar after all. I'll probably disappear from the modern age. You could say that my wish will finally be granted.
Your wish?
Sincere, I wish to die for my king. Can you help me grant this wish?
To this, Heartless frowned. It was the first time she had smiled like that since she was summoned. Without really noticing, she brought her flask of wine to her mouth, relishing in the aroma of fermented grapes. They had to pack lightly for their trip here, but Faker had insisted on bringing the finest wine.
Determined you are a mage, right? In that case, kill me proudly and bravely. Guide your people forward, using the ancient yet new light from the age of the gods.
At this, Faker suddenly changed the topic.
Observant? No, that's not what you're doing all this for.
For the slightest instant, no, even slighter than the slightest instant, Heartless held his breath. It was such a small change that only a servant could have noticed it.
So you know?
Analytical, hey, I've known you for 2 months now. I've never been adept at grasping the subtleties of human hearts, but I have a sense of who you are. You are a modern mage, foreign in your own world. You have an uncanny knack for scheming, but because you hate it, it will never come naturally to you. You're like a skilled chemist who makes neither poison nor medicine, choosing instead to stare idly at the clouds as they pass by. You live your life in such a stupor that you wouldn't even heed my king's calls.
You're the first one who has ever described me that way.
Path means that you are surrounded by unobservant people.
After a pause, Faker stopped and turned to stare blankly at Heartless.
Mocking oh, so you do have a sense of humor then? Or are you unwell? Did the elixir twist your brain?
Perhaps. But even I will laugh at jokes I find funny. I've heard many tales of Albion from my students. Maybe what you said reminded me of the past?
Faker tried to imagine the Heartless of the past, as he was when he was still the head of the Department of Modern Magecraft.
Your students were survivors of the labyrinth?
Yes, their names were Klug, Ashara, Jorek, Gesell, and Kuru.
I'm nostalgic. Heartless spoke his students' names like the words of an incantation in a long-dead language.
We reminisced that Kuru enjoyed listening to those stories most. For instance, I was told that Kaluk and Jorek, who were in charge of defending against phantasmal species, used interesting techniques to fight. They used incense and flute to cover for Gesell and Kuru while they dug for minerals in the Great Magic Circuit. I heard that Ashara, the teen lookout, made maps of the labyrinth, which must have been a difficult task.
Confused, but weren't they all spies sent into Albion by the clock tower?
Faker was not unfamiliar with spies and plotting. They were tools of her age as well. Still, it was perfectly natural for someone to be overwhelmed by a scheme so intricate that it spanned several decades and factions.
Explaining aside from Gesell caused a lot of confusion with their act. Due to their switching places, I had no choice but to kill Kaluv, or perhaps Jorek in the secret autopsy division, even though Gesell could be transported silently. I did what I could to deal with the body, but that grand-ranked mage still easily saw through my efforts.
To Koko Ozaki had asked Heartless this. It had not escaped her notice that his missing students had belonged to other factions prior to their becoming his students. They had gone into Albion so that they would one day be able to help the more powerful people in their factions.
Kuru died a long time ago, did he not? So it was only Ashara who managed to escape.
It doesn't matter that she did. I might not ever return to the surface. I just wanted to rid myself of those attachments.
Attachments?
Faker noticed the silver briefcase that Heartless was carrying in one hand. It didn't look like something one would typically bring to explore a labyrinth. Cast by our Taylor Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening.
Ah.
Master, remember that you are my master. My wishes do not matter. You do not have to follow this plan to its end. Were it my choice, I would take you from Albion right this moment to wherever you wanted to go, whether it be to the clinic where that doctor cared for you, or to a distant corner of the world where no one knows of you. Maybe I don't have enough magical energy for that, but I'll stay with you as long as I can, until the end of the Grail War.
Heartless hesitated for a moment before he replied.
Would you prefer that kind of life?
Don't be ridiculous.
She paused, then and pondered for a few seconds.
Actually, perhaps I would.
Nostalgic muttering words that carried a few millennia of weight, Faker and Heartless continued to traverse the forest of coral that made up the great magic circuit.
Nostalgic when I was still alive, I never stayed in the same place for long once I reached adulthood. My king always had some place he willed us to travel. By contrast, his mother Olympias wished I remained caged up in a temple, repeating the same prayers over and over again so I could become a priestess of Dionysus. But I could not call that life. It was merely house arrest. The school I attended is the only place I could call home.
School? Do you mean Misa, the shrine of the nymphs?
Informative, it was the name of the school where Iskandar, along with his future generals, had studied under the great philosopher Aristotle. It was not an exaggeration to call it one of the best-known schools in history, and Faker had studied there as well.
Did you spend your time watching the clouds while you studied there?
I did sometimes. I wish I had spent longer watching them. I am my king's shadow, but I was not constantly with him. I only learned half of what the others did. Eumenes and Clytus always shunned me because they were skeptical of magecraft.
Is that why you can't forgive the traitors who fought in the wars of the Diadochi?
Maybe.
After Iskandar's death, his mother and generals had begun a meaningless bloodbath in an attempt to prove who among them was the strongest. It was the reason why she hadn't heeded her king's call to join his army and chose to serve Heartless instead.
I realized it soon after I was summoned. Even now, thinking of it fills me with hate. Maybe my brother would have fought as well if he hadn't died. Maybe we would have thought that we could have come out on top. I had hoped you would disagree.
It was Faker's turn to ask a question.
How did it feel being betrayed by your students?
If only I could answer that question. If I was able to answer it with a quick, sloppy answer, I wouldn't be here. For most people, settling for whatever works is the way of life. Suppressing emotions is one of a mage's most basic skills, but I will never be able to do that. That's why I summoned you and brought you here.
Light from the great magic circuit flickered across Faker's face, flashing white and red, the colors shifting as though in tune with her emotions.
Determined it does not matter that I feel like I would do the same if I was there. I cannot forgive them. It is selfish of me, but I cannot give up on the chance to have my king appear again.
Why could a servant smile so innocent and pure?
We're the same in that sense, aren't we?
Heartless nodded. Then he suddenly recoiled. Faker had pressed her index finger to his forehead.
Blayful, you are a mess. Do not dare show such a weak expression again. In truth, though, I do not hate that expression. I would like to see it again, perhaps over a drink. That, of course, I know. Not even my king could outdo me in that sense. I am a priestess of Dionysus, after all.
Oh, with another smile. Faker took yet another sip of wine.
Either way, we have no time for wine now, do we?
Snatching the bottle from Faker's hand, Heartless drank the rest of the wine in one gulp. The servant from ancient Macedonia looked on at him, satisfied. But she had one more question.
The grand roll will start soon, will it not? Do you think it will go as you predicted?
Who knows? It doesn't affect our plan.
True.
Faker turned to look at the labyrinth before her, sure of the many twists and turns that remained in the forest of coral. It was beautiful in a way that lured unwary intruders to their deaths in the maws of unknown beasts. As they forged ahead to even deeper depths, Heartless's voice was firm and confident.
I determined, let's go, I'll make sure to give you a proper death.
I look forward to it, Master. I've awaited this moment for 2,000 years.
The two walked side by side down a road woven of light and darkness, as if they walked down a wedding carpet to a guillotine. Chapter 2, Part 1. The sight before my eyes reminded me of the rainforests I had seen on TV. Ferns blanketed the ground while the leaves of giant trees stretched upward, filtering the light. Even though it was winter above the ground, walking through this forest had drenched me with sweat. Strange creatures passed by us occasionally. If any of them were particularly dangerous, Luvia warned us before we made contact.
There are 2 water elemental reactions and 1 wind elemental reaction at 8 o'clock. We should turn around to avoid them.
Flu and Luvia had already made us change direction countless times in response to signals received by the 5 gemstones that floated around Luvia, which each corresponded to an element. Like Gareth had said, it was a type of magecraft well suited to Albion. Not only were we able to avoid most fights, but my mentor also pointed out that we knew the right way to respond to an enemy, even if we encountered one. In the brief 30 minutes that we had been in Albion, the old man's advice had already proved quite useful. If it had not been for his map and Flu's experience, our trip would have been much more eventful. The environment never remained the same for very long. However, 2 things remained constant, much to our surprise. First, there was so much magical energy here that even breathing was enough to make our lungs feel numb. Second, there was always a strange river of light on the ground, made up of many tiny streams that babbled and pulsated. Even though I had never seen this magnificent scene before, it felt kind of familiar. It almost reminded me of the magic circuits that circulated magical energy through all mages. It finally dawned on me. So that's why this place is called the Great Magic Circuit.
I'd be dead! But its magic circuits are still alive with the mystery of the Age of the Gods. That's why the Great Magic Circuit is also called the Udvina.
Does that mean that the true ether of the Age of the Gods might still be circulating here?
Amuse, so there isn't much Mage can do to damage this place, eh?
Hearing Flu say that, I transformed Dad into a different state and tried hacking at the band of light on the floor. It wasn't affected at all. Is the strange ecosystem here also a result of the Great Magic Circuit?
Informative, sure, it'll do weird stuff to the critters living here, but it's a headache to talk about. Every part of this labyrinth can shift at any second, although the movements tend to follow a pattern. Still, talking about cause and effect relationships is just about impossible when it comes to Albion.
Mysterious as if the labyrinth understood what Flu was saying, the band of light became red, and then green. In the midst of the shifting light, something appeared.
Watch out!
A shadow crawled out from beneath the ferns, shifting from a 2-dimensional shadow to a 3-dimensional creature before our eyes. Even though it looked like a regular snake, it clearly wasn't. What kind of snake could jump in the air and shoot purple electricity?
Worried, Miss Luvia?
Dramatic, one of the gemstones floating around Luvia had absorbed the electricity. Luvia seemed to have seamlessly transitioned from using detection magecraft to defensive magecraft before Segan could react to the attack. Flu sent a knife flying at the creature, slicing it through its snake-like head before it could harm Luvia.
Careful. That snake is one such creature who spent too much time here and ended up more like a phantasmal species from the Age of the Gods. You could say its innate domain is like magecraft.
What do you mean by that?
Informative, well, the term phantasmal species means a lot of things. Surface phantasmal species evolved naturally, for instance, but the phantasmal species in Albion, or ones from the Age of the Gods, have traits that shouldn't exist. Innate domain refers to what they use to bend the rules.
I see. Interesting. Luvia dusted herself off and walked a bit more before she spoke again.
Our destination is the ancient heart, right?
Yes. When the time comes, the grand roll will be held there.
Heartless' plan to perform a magecraft ritual right next to the stage of the Grand Roll was extremely bold. Of course, there was a reason behind his choice of location. The ancient heart held a concentration of ancient mystery that was higher than anywhere else.
Just to be clear, Heartless wants to bring back the Age of the Gods by summoning Iskander as a divine spirit? I know how strange Magus can be, but this is just too hard to believe.
The Magecraft from the Age of the Gods allows people to directly access the authority of divine spirits. And since divine spirits are close to the root, mages won't have to search for the root anymore.
Do you think that's a goal worth reaching?
No, Heartless Solution is nothing more than a dream. Mages have been stuck on the same goal for 2,000 years. He's trying to solve a problem by running away from it, like daydreaming to try and dull the pain of living.
Saigon's next words may have sounded funny, but he wasn't joking. Saigon looked to his new arm and then to my mentor. For a moment he stared in silence at the person who had once convicted him of a crime.
So that means you're putting yourself in danger to destroy someone's dream. That does sound like something you'd do. Lord El-Melloi II.
In response to Sagan's somewhat sarcastic statement, my mentor nodded sincerely.
Sincere, I agree.
To be fair, though, sincerity was his only possible response. My mentor was often overly sincere toward the world. Just like how he called himself an evil person, he was likely aware that his sincerity would bite him in the back one day. The thought of that haunted me for quite a while.
I also have something I would like to confirm. The timing of this grand roll is no coincidence, is it? Servants cannot be summoned without the Holy Grail, while the dike that separates the ancient heart can only be opened for the grand roll.
Exactly.
In that case, Heartless must have used his position as someone who is not a lord, but is close to the lords to place himself in an advantageous position.
This was the same conclusion my mentor had reached. In other words, one of the attendees of the grand roll was Heartless' accomplice.
Right now, my sister Ryans is dealing with that matter.
Amused you two really trust each other, even though it is still unclear whether the accomplice belongs to the aristocratic faction or is a democratic faction. The faction they belong to is now your enemy. What an interesting idea.
My mentor turned to look at the young woman as she spoke incessantly.
You know, it's very possible that the Edelfelts will be involved somehow. Why are you saying this and still helping me?
Why does my family's involvement mean that I should not accompany you? Not many mages today have the chance to witness mystery like this. It's only for the small price of antagonizing a faction of the clock tower. So, why would I hesitate?
I see.
Luvia was as direct about her thoughts as ever. Her attitude had been the same when she asked my mentor to tutor her. After all, besides being a mage, she was also a noble. Even when Luvia took things from others, she could probably arrogantly say, "This is the way I am. I will never change." That was why I found her very beautiful.
This is where the supposed shortcut can be found. Correct?
Yeah, we are almost there.
Observant within 10 minutes of walking, all the plants around us disappeared, leaving behind a nasty stench that originated from a river that barred our path. We had witnessed plenty of strange sights since we arrived here, but this river was far too wide. It seemed to stretch for several hundred meters from one bank to the other. From the way the water filtered the light from the dragon's magic circuits, we could tell that it was also quite deep. Normally, a river of these dimensions could probably be crossed by using magecraft to float or glide across. It didn't take me long to decide that doing so may not be a viable option. I saw a rock roughly the size of a human head tumble down the bank and dissolve instantly upon hitting the water, leaving only bubbles behind. A river of acid? The rock had probably disappeared before it sank to the bottom. A person would probably last a few seconds in the acid. The only reason why it didn't eat further into the banks was the result of the dragon's magic circuits, which was probably the only thing that could resist the river's corrosion.
This is the shortcut Giraffe mentioned. It's one of the better ones.
How is this one of the better ones?
Give it a second. He just scattered some spices. They should be here soon.
Spice? What?
I could understand Sagan's bewilderment. Even though the dark objects that flew toward us were more familiar to me than the other monsters of the labyrinth, I was just as surprised to see them. It was a flock of giant beetles, each the size of a person.
Yes, here they come.
Mr. Flew? I had similar doubts as Sagan about the beetles, but I was still too shocked to speak.
Just open up.
How do you expect this to work?
Sagan's cries were in vain. Flew enhanced his legs, leaping tens of meters into the air and landing on one of the beetles. It wasn't a perfect landing, but he quickly adjusted his balance and jumped across one after the other. Watching Flu jump with ease, I felt my stomach twist.
Oh, this is just ridiculous.
Though she complained, Luvia followed in Flu's footsteps, unfazed by the absurdity of the situation. She sailed over the swarm of beetles with the grace of a princess ascending a glass staircase. I didn't know why, but I felt as if I had entered a scene from a kid's bedtime story written by a person of terrible taste. Sure, it was hard to believe, but considering the physical capabilities of mages, it was not impossible. Either way, it must have taken so much trial and error for the excavation teams to figure out a mind-boggling technique like using bugs as stepping stones.
Worried sorry, Gray, but I'll be counting on you if I fall.
I nodded, steeling my resolve. Both with courage and fear, we began to make our way to the other side of the river. Chapter 2, Part 2.
I felt a twinge of dizziness as I walked through the rift portal. Phase shifting always resulted in this, as if my soul were a fraction of a second slower than my body. It had been a few hours since I headed out from the clock tower. After being subjected to a security check by the Arcane Dissection Division, I was finally deep inside the earth near the meeting room I had been invited to. The scene that I saw from the towers connecting to the rifts was far from what I imagined. This place resembled a giant altar. Some types of magecraft can only work at a certain height because mystery can only prosper when separated from the regular world, so I wasn't surprised by the towers in the least. I wasn't surprised by the dimly shining dome above me, either. What unsettled me was the constant deep rumbling noise, like the growling of a giant monster. That metaphor was actually not that far from the truth. This city was basically a giant organism made up of an endless sea of buildings that resembled a modern architect's remix of a beehive. Magecraft was probably the only reason why I wasn't constantly collapsing. Was this place also an academic city like the street of the Department of Modern Magecraft? I wondered. Apart from the first department, Mistile, which sat in the heart of London, every other department was scattered in the surrounding area like satellites. So was the mining city of Albion one of them as well, not just an underground fortress like I had imagined. I suddenly realized that I would probably need more than reports to get an accurate sense of what I was about to deal with.
So it is your first time here.
Observant leaning on his cane, the old man stared at me unblinkingly. His voice was accompanied by the clinking sound of his 3 necklaces bumping against each other. There were 2 diamond rings on each of his withered hands. All of these trinkets were encrusted with gems that probably cost several fortunes. Even so, it didn't feel like the old man was showing off his wealth. The glittering jewels framed his aged body, making it more like treasures buried along with a corpse. If the old man dozed off on his own, he would probably be mistaken for a mummy that walked out of the British Museum. But his jewels surrounded him with a strange golden glow. He was Rufleus Nuathareulithus, the lord of the Department of Spiritual Evocation. Unlike my brother, he was a tried and true member of the aristocratic faction. While I haven't had many opportunities to deal with matters relating to Albion, it's not as though I'm completely ignorant about it. I'm aware that this was the original form of the clock tower, for instance.
Raspy, one could say, that time has stopped here. If one considers mages to be beings who face the past, this underground labyrinth should be seen as our home.
Observant as he said this, the old man walked away at an amazing speed, despite the fact that he had to rely on his cane. I turned in place, taking in the sight of the other structures littered about the area. I was standing in a room about the size of a gymnasium and filled with workers milling about. Everyone here appeared to either be a mage or a golem. The golems were of a better caliber than the ones you could see walking around the first department. Really, that just goes to show how special Albion really was. But there was something here that caught my eye even more. Is this a composite workshop? I blurted out, my voice escaping my mouth. It was a phrase that could surprise anyone even vaguely knowledgeable about magecraft. Usually, mages didn't reveal their workshops to others. The only exceptions to that rule were students or disciples. Some might reveal a small corner, but never the inner workings. The core of a workshop contained the essence of one's own magecraft, so it was only reasonable to be so secretive. I couldn't help but wonder what secrets my brother could reveal if he was here as well. If he conducted his usual unflinching dissection of the magecraft here, I'd be sure to hear a good cry of despair. Maybe it would also help our standing in the clock tower, but I didn't care about that half as much as I cared about making my brother despair at his worthlessness.
Composite Workshop Cleagra.
Observant came a hoarse voice beside me as a grand scene unfolded before my eyes. An enormous machine was pouring a bubbling liquid from a flask twice the size of my body into several similarly sized beakers. It was followed by a truck-sized container that was carried on rails to a distiller. All the while, different catalysts were being poured into the liquid to cause reactions. These contraptions were not the core of the workshop. I could count at least several dozen. These machines were the source of the deep bellowing noise. Eventually, the vat of liquid was transformed into a small golden prism the size of my finger. Even though I was a mage, I had no idea what processes had occurred to make this possible. I was tempted to call it a waste of time, but I couldn't help but be moved by the spectacle. Yes, this was magecraft was meant to be. Though equal exchange was the basis of magecraft, depletion was also an essential part. Rather than receiving an equal amount of what you give, magecraft sometimes involved diluting something into nothingness. By stretching something limited into something infinite, mages believed that they could create miracles. The more I thought about it, the more stupid I realized we were. This is concentrated spirit ore, right?
Only Albion contains concentrated spirit ore of this quality. In the past, the distilled block could be the size of a fist.
That's why Lord El-Melloi brought up his request, isn't it? Of course the Democratic faction would bring up a request like redeveloping Spirit 2 Albion. The resources mined from Albion were evidently decreasing in quantity. Mages were already an endangered species. What would happen to us if Albion ceased to provide us with materials? Even though it sounded like a good solution, I couldn't easily comply. The rewards were indeed great. But what about the costs? Considering the scale of mining operations in Albion now, it was plain to see that redevelopment would be expensive. If the redevelopment failed, all our hopes and dreams would evaporate quite magnificently. It was a catch-22 situation with no way out. Why were mages such fragile creatures? I wondered, inadvertently feeling happy at the thought.
And Raspy, any thoughts on witnessing a composite workshop for the first time? El-Melloi Princess.
I am quite impressed that we as mages can actually work together.
How the someone who claims to dislike the nature of mages, you seem quite happy.
No, not particularly.
I feel relieved either way. This way, you can hold your own.
Observant, Ruflius said, patting his cane. The composite workshop was reflected in his murky eyes.
Everyone in Albion fights to survive, and everyone here is a mage. This is the only place where a composite work could work without violating the rule of secrecy.
Neither the secretive nature nor the pride of mages mattered here. No mage could survive by trying to hoard their magecraft. The underground dictated that mages had to dedicate their work to the common cause. Many mages from the surface would be disgusted by this. Others might even die from anger. But this was the way of life in the mining city of Spiritum Albion. You're not just here to be a tour guide, right? Observant, the old man said, pointing with his chin to a silhouette that stood between the giant machines. That person had probably arrived before us, or taken a different portal. It was a girl who was even younger than I was, who was currently waving and staring indignantly at us.
Come on! We don't have much time!
She had silver hair, and her amber eyes held shadows that didn't fit her young face. It was a sign that she was a proper mage, well soaked in the evils of our society. The more unfortunate the color reflected in someone's eyes, the more vivid they were as a mage. That was simply how our world worked. When I was even younger than she was, I had been dragged into conspiracy upon conspiracy. Countless attempts had been made on my life. If a weak or maladjusted person is suddenly given a great deal of power, it's only natural that hordes would rush forward to seize that power for themselves. It might seem contradictory, but warding off these hordes as one grows up makes for the best mage. A mage's spirit is best completed with a struggle. Thanks to my past, I could empathize with the wounds inflicted on her soul with a helpless authenticity. Hey, Olgamari. Her full name was Olgamari Asmite Amisphere. She was the daughter of the Lord of the Department of Astromancy, making her the other representative at this meeting. I couldn't help but find this matchup ridiculous. Sorry that your teammates this time are two little girls. I hope we don't burden... Oh... No... My terrible personality was extending to my elders as well. I didn't care about the old man's opinion of me, but I'd rather not have him hate me just yet.
Raspy, do not fret. Simply watch in silence from your seats.
These words did not come from the bottom of his heart. Someone like Ruflius wasn't capable of saying something of that nature and meaning it. Instead, he meant that he would win as long as he had the votes. That was the old man's usual way of speaking. He had the pride befitting a member of the Olephus family, one of the oldest and most prestigious families in the clock tower. I felt something cold slide across the inside of my throat, as if I had been stabbed by a well-sharpened knife. It was too easy to forget your place and fall prey to the truly powerful people in the clock tower.
But at least you did not run away.
Of course he took the chance to criticize my brother. No, I think my brother gave this chance to me because the experience will be valuable for a future lord. I decided to defend my brother this time, even though the old man probably didn't believe a word I said. I wasn't sure if Ruflius knew what my brother was doing now, but it wouldn't be hard for him to figure out. My situation was actually better than my brother's. I may have been from an insignificant branch of the family, but I was still an El-Melloi. Ruflius, who considered bloodlines to be the only way to measure the value of a mage, probably thought me to be at least human. My brother was only a new agger, a maggot in Ruflius' eyes. Well, I wasn't sure if that was exactly what he thought, but it didn't matter. In front of my brother, I tried to control myself, but I was a mage through and through. It was important to remember that I derived joy from other people's pain. Since Gray and the other members of the El-Melloi classroom weren't here, I could reveal my true self. No matter how I tried to put up appearances, my core would not change.
The old man shifted his gaze from me.
And, Raspy, come with me, Miss Anonosphere.
How fancy! She was the heir, after all, so it made sense for Ruflius to be polite. It was clear that she got preferential treatment, but I wasn't angry. Maybe I should apologize that my family's succession battle eventually ended with the crown being placed on the head of such an insignificant person.
Understood!
The old man then turned to look at me again.
And I was just being addressed by my first name. Fine, I'd expected that.
Hi, Raspy, there is half a day until the gate to the ancient heart opens. Feel free to rest so that you do not faint during the grand roll.
Thank you for your kindness, but I'd like to take this chance to explore the mining city some more. I didn't have much time. I needed to collect more information. There probably wasn't much a newcomer to Albion could do, but I figured I'd try my best.
In that case, let us meet again in the ancient heart.
I felt the scent of faint perfume as I passed her. In 10 years, she would probably grow up to be a beautiful woman with many suitors. I hoped that at least one of those suitors would be a decent match for her. Upon leaving the composite workshop, I squinted in the blinding light and stopped a few meters away. What a girls' school way of doing things. But I had to admit that it was the safest one, as I had no way to tell what magecraft Ruflius was capable of. I slowly opened my hand, revealing a crumpled note. Olga Mary had written something on the edge of the piece of paper.
Pinuff. Chapter 2. Part 3. There was nothing before my eyes but a vast expanse of grey. I stumbled around for a moment before I realized I was surrounded by gravestones. Even though the gravestones had been regularly cleaned, erosion had still worn at them. I could imagine the engravings of the names of the dead being blown to pieces by the wind. This was a dream. I was in Blackmore Graveyard, a place that always reminded me of the raspy voice of a certain person.
That is what you must destroy? That, and only that?
I had heard this countless times from Bazak Blackmore, the man who had taught me secret arts of gravekeeping. Thinking back, he probably wanted to give me strength to call my own, regardless of whether I was to become the vessel of King Arthur or my own person, but it wasn't like he would have ever told me that. I staggered about in the thick mist. There seemed to be nothing beyond the graveyard, as if the place that made me so nostalgic was actually a prison. No, it was actually more like I would be safe from disaster as long as I stayed here, but eventually I would rot and die here anyway.
Amused hay, we don't have time for you think stupid things like that. This is an emergency, not nap time. Wake up.
Ad? No, it wasn't Ad. A hazy figure appeared beside me. For some reason this figure seemed familiar. It dawned on me, finally, that the voice I heard had also belonged to a knight. But that knight was a shadow of the past, and should have disappeared after the incident in my hometown. Sir Kay?
Understood, don't get too close to fairies, or else you'll mess up reality. It's even worse in dreams, thanks to that court mage, Merlin.
Though I couldn't see his face, he seemed to be smirking. The sudden appearance of this man made my head whirl, as if I had been tossed into a hurricane. It wasn't like I expected to ever see him again, after all.
Time and space seem fuzzy here. You're probably here because that kid's getting close. That also must be why your dream was set here in the graveyard.
That kid?
I guess you could call her my little sister.
Sir Kay's little sister? That must mean the great king who my body was supposed to belong to. What did it mean if she was getting close?
All right, you have a place you need to go back to. You shouldn't be wandering around here.
The figure waved his fingers, drawing a shining line in the darkness. Is that? The line's light grew, taking over my vision like an approaching star. He was right. I couldn't stay here anymore.
I'm sincere, have some faith in yourself. The end will be here soon, so I hope fate goes easy on you.
The knight's voice was low. I wrapped my arms around myself, and my dream shattered around me.
Worried Gray? Gray?
I heard a worried voice and felt the weight of a hand on my shoulder. Through the leather glove, the hand felt gentle and warm, as if handling something fragile. On that note, my mentor had changed gloves before we came down here. The soft smell of cigars and leather tugged at my consciousness, and I slowly roused from my haze. Above me, the magic circuits of the dragon shone with brilliant light. In my half-awake state, I recalled that Flu had suggested that we rest for a bit. I had been so tired, I probably fell asleep immediately. My senses came back to me all at once, and I was immediately aware of our current situation. My hair was stuck to my forehead with sweat. I probably hadn't slept in a very flattering pose. Thinking about it was enough to make my face heat up in embarrassment. Sorry. I just had a strange dream.
A dream?
It's nothing. I queried in any case. I couldn't admit that I had dreamt of Sir Kay. I hurriedly wiped the sweat from my face and looked down.
Sorry. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to.
What a worrywart. You don't have to worry about how Gray's doing as long as I'm here.
I wanted to ask if he had seen my dream of Sir Kay as well, but I found it too difficult to ask. Instead, it was my mentor who asked Ad a question.
Are you all right as well, Ad?
Oh, yeah.
It was rare to see Ad close his carved eyes so quickly without making any unnecessary jokes. Though he didn't say it outright, his intent was clear. I would not be able to use Rongominiad again. It was as the director of the Atlas Institute had said back in my hometown. Ever since I released the Seal of 13 during the fight on the Rail Zeppelin, Ad had begun to break apart. Though its self-repair abilities meant that it was not eternally asleep, it would not withstand another use of the lance. Even though I had kept this a secret from Ad and my mentor, they already knew. Briefly, I wondered how bad I must have been at hiding things. For this reason, there was something else I had to say. But, sir, you're still going to continue onward regardless, right?
Well,
Sincere, I don't think inconveniencing other people will stop you from going, sir. Because Mr. Iskandar's... I couldn't finish my sentence. It didn't seem right for someone like me to try and summarize my mentor's relationship with the king, who was about to be transformed into a divine spirit. I was the only one that needed to hear my thoughts. All I had to do was witness his journey.
I feel like I keep getting scolded by you on this trip.
That's because you're usually the one doing the scolding, sir.
Strangely enough, I also smiled at that. Still, my happiness didn't last very long. Sir, are you...
I'm fine. It's nothing in comparison.
Worried, though his face bore a slight smile. It wasn't only pale because of the illumination by the light of the dragon's magic circuits. Still, that was no longer a reason for him to stop in his tracks. At this depth, the labyrinth would take a toll on us no matter how careful we were. Even though we had avoided direct conflict, the dense magical energy of Albion churned inside us. Since my mentor had the worst resistance to mana among all of us, It was only natural that he would feel the effects first.
Vorrei not to embarrass you, Lord El-Melloi II, but can you still walk?
To be honest, breathing is getting difficult, but I'll be fine.
Da che dis.
Fluga tossed him a bag of vials.
Informativa, you can think of it like magical altitude sickness. It's water off a duck's back to someone with strong enough magic circuits, but you'd probably be better off with these.
Thank you.
My mentor downed the contents of one of the vials with a miserable expression, only to look 3 times as miserable when he was finished. Next, Fluga packed up the mystic code that we had used to camp. Along some more incense, it created a bounded field that warded off monsters. Flu had warned us that not all monsters would be deterred, but luckily, we had been spared that unfortunate fate. We had just finished our second rest after being in the maze for nearly half a day. Every twist and turn of the great magic circuit that we encountered along the shortcut we were taking brought a new type of terrain completely different from the last. So far, I had seen a lush jungle, a misty tundra, a field of bubbling lava, and hills illuminated by constant lightning. Even though I thought I had seen a lot, Flu insisted that we hadn't even seen 1% of this place. Our journey was surprisingly peaceful, no doubt thanks to Garrus' map and Luvia and Saigon's efforts. Sagan was incredibly sensitive to subtle changes in the environment thanks to his training, a skill which he hadn't had the chance to use in the Adrai incident due to his being the culprit. Now, we were probably around the 27th floor, although saying that, we hadn't been descending 1 floor at a time. The dark passageway that Flu had led us through had deposited us on the 4th floor.
Informative, the top 10 floors of the Great Magic Circuit have all been scraped clean of resources. Nowadays, mining starts from the 30th floor, while the 60th floor is about the deepest skilled teams are willing to go. Where we're going is the Ancient Heart, which is on the 150th floor.
So there's no way we're going to make it in time.
Of course not. Most of the time, breaching the 100th floor is accomplished by a bunch of teams working together. They set up campsites and roads along the way, forming a path that can last a few months or a year. No matter how many shortcuts you take, this is as far as traveling half a day is gonna take you.
Before I came here myself, I never could have imagined that people would go that far to mine things. Now, the idea felt a little more likely.
Determined? So, in order to reach the Ancient Heart in half a day, we gotta take a different approach. A path that no excavator in their right mind would take.
With this, we left the place where we had just camped and walked for another half an hour or so. Eventually, we came to a stop before a vast expanse of nothingness, and we all stood, shocked into silence.
Informative, you wouldn't think it, but the entrance to the 30th floor still has some stuff in it. More experienced teams typically pass right by it. But the uppermost floors are the best place for the greener excavators to find talismans if they're too scared to go any deeper.
Flu's words were met by the low buzzing of the maze, as we were all still struggling to process the sight in front of us. Finally, Saigon spoke up.
Is this what Giraffe mentioned earlier?
E calls it the Pit of Oblivion.
The pit in question was the giant circular hole that we currently stood at the edge of. I tossed a pebble into it, but even with my enhanced hearing, I couldn't hear it strike the bottom.
Informative, the Ancient Heart is approximately tens of kilometers under the mining city. In regular reality, that would be deep enough to reach Earth's mantle, so of course you can't hear it hit the ground.
But Albion doesn't sit on the same coordinate plane as reality, right?
Informative as far as theories of reality are concerned, we should have run out of oxygen long ago. Although Magecraft can distort the laws of physics, creating things from nothing is not simple. The only thing that is keeping us alive is the fact that Albion exists in a fissure between here and there. However, such a nature also has a negative effect on us. The Pit of Oblivion. What a fitting name. Is it really deep enough to reach the Ancient Heart?
No one knows, because nobody who's gone in has come back alive. All I can guarantee is that my teacher is an astrologist. When he discovered this hole, he supposedly felt that the flow here connected to the dragon's heart. It's worth a bet, right?
No. That's not the problem here at all. I know where Mage. So we can survive jumping down from buildings. But tensor kirashi? Also, the mana here is peppered with holes. What's there to stop us from going supply if the spell fails?
Worried the situation had been similar in the Child of Einish, if forest that had appeared to obstruct the rail zeppelin. If it wasn't for the support provided by Melvin, we wouldn't have been able to use enhancement properly. I probably would have died there. This situation was even more dire.
We can't use a rope, because they don't make ropes long enough. So our only option is gliding down with mystic codes. You only need a pinch of wood to operate these.
Flu took out several mystic codes that seemed to be made of small pieces of cloth. They looked more like bird wings than gliders.
Are those Icarus's wings? They must not have been easy to find.
You can't fly with them, but it should be enough to glide down there.
I suppose we're not going to fly too close to the sun from here after all.
Observant, though Luvia looked surprised, she still acted composed. Even so, I was sure that she must have had her doubts.
What it seems like a risky gamble.
This entire trip is a risky gamble. The ancient heart is the deepest part of the clock tower that can be reached. If you go down even further, you'll reach the realm of the fairies, a place where no human has ever set foot.
My mentor's words reminded me of the map that Sveen had drawn. Beneath the mining city, the greater magic circuit, and the ancient heart was the realm of the fairies. Albion did not end there. Rather, it was just that humans did not know what lay there.
Informative, everything from here is unknown. Even if this hole is directly connected to the ancient heart, it doesn't mean that our work is done once we get down. Remember, we're here to find Heartless. We ought to take any rests we can as we head down.
Rest? As we glide down the pit? That doesn't sound like a good idea.
My mentor said, putting on the mystic code. I followed his movements and clumsily put it on myself. It appeared that I only needed to activate my magic circuits to activate it as well.
I want to test this a little before we jump.
Wari. No, we should probably jump right now. I was just wondering how a hole of this size was made. Now I get it.
So what made this all?
Dramatic, one of Luvia's eyebrows shot upward as one of the gemstones floating around her began to shine with a faint light. Suddenly, the ground a few meters behind them burst, revealing the things that had been hiding inside. An earthworm? It didn't seem right to call this monstrosity by the same name as its tiny surface counterparts. It was the same size as the rail zeppelin, less like an animal and more like a storm cloud. What made it worse was that it was not alone. Chapter 2. Part 4.
Move it.
At Flu's instruction, we dove into the pit of oblivion. However, the giant earthworms pursued us ruthlessly, like predators that finally tricked some prey. They twisted their way in behind us and began to close in.
How are they catching up? We're basically in a free fall.
That means they're not as stupid as they look. This is Albion, after all.
This...
Dramatic, the wings on Luvia's back unfolded, allowing her to glide with the grace of an angel, even though this was her first time trying it on.
determined call.
We were falling at an incredible speed. Even in a bizarre place like this, gravity was working as usual. Though we were plummeting downward, the distance between us and the giant earthworms chasing us did not change. Neither Luvia's magic bullets nor Flu's knives were able to deter them from barreling towards us. This isn't going to work. I was the only one in the team who hadn't gotten used to the mystic code yet. Though I was passing as much magical energy through it as I could muster, I was still tumbling around while everyone else was gliding, including my mentor. There were currently 3 earthworms chasing us, generating a shift in pressure equal to a hurricane. With their terrifying speed, they were like moving mountains. In the next instant, however, I gasped for a different reason. Something on the head of the earthworms chasing us opened, revealing crystals that didn't belong on them.
Eyes? I thought? No, they were not simply eyes. The moment those crystals appeared, I felt a shift in the magical energy around us. For some reason, the shift felt familiar. What?
They have mystic eyes?
dramatic I couldn't even begin to imagine how earthworms managed to get mystic eyes. It was something that could only exist thanks to the labyrinth. The mystic eyes themselves were fairly basic, being only capable of low-level suggestion. However, it was impressive enough, considering that we never expected earthworms to be capable of using magecraft. Except for one person, we all froze in the air in various states of shock. Sagan used his wings to flip himself around and reached out. The spirit root in place of his arm extended, turning into a hook that pierced the head of the earthworm closest to us.
Amuse, it's kind of gross, but it sure is convenient.
Using his other arm, Sagan lifted his eye patch. In an instant, magical energy gathered into something that surprised me again. The earthworms were probably similarly surprised, as fire flared from their mystic eyes.
Can't ford it.
Dramatic. My mystic code finally began. Working, I sent as much magical energy as I could muster, reversing the direction I was moving in. Eyed, determined, add.
Gotcha!
My scythe unfolded, and I slashed at the earthworm. The earthworm was too large to be seriously injured by such an attack, but it was enough to make the monster retreat.
What was just that then, Sagan?
I was just wondering how I was meant to get on that there. Before we met there, I had a little surgery performed on my eye. I'm not famous in the world of Magecraft, but I have plenty of money from Osborne.
Right, his inheritance.
I was also reminded once again of the incident at Adra, the Castle of Separation.
I almost forgot what that incident was originally advertised as.
Nostalgia. The person who captures the angel will gain the inheritance.
Hadashino Hishiri had taken care of the inheritance on behalf of the Department of Law. It appeared that she had done the right thing with it. Though there was some debate at first, Ashbourne's son, Granid Ashbourne, that was to say, Sagan, was eligible to inherit his father's estate. The will from back then stated that the estate belonged to the person who captured the angel. When asked for the angel's name, my mentor had responded. In that case, had Sagan captured the angel, or had the angel captured him? My mentor touched the mystic code, covering his shoulders, as if he wanted to rid his mind of pointless associations.
Determined it's time for us to go down.
Each flap of our wings brought us deeper and deeper into the depths, closer and closer to the bottomless darkness of the ancient heart. Mysterious magical energy surged like ocean waves in a way that was rare even in Albion. It was extraordinary both in quantity and quality. Some in the modern day might even say that it was close to true ether. Others would probably argue that it was completely different from the true ether of the past. It wasn't clear which side was correct. Regardless, the name of this place was carved into the mind of everyone who knew of Albion. Mysterious the ancient heart. It was a place where the belt of light present elsewhere in the labyrinth coalesced into a spiral of white and aqua, signaling that it was separate from the great magic circuit. It was much smaller than the greater magic circuit, which was made from 100 floors stacked together. That meant that the mystery here was more condensed, as the waves of energy had just demonstrated. Although the dragon's heart should have stopped beating long ago, the great hall still seemed to pulse. It was as if the room wanted to emphasize that it was no more than a single cell carrying out its duty.
My plan ends here.
In reality, it was not over yet, though he had just completed a large-scale spell. He glanced to the silver case he clutched under his arm.
But of course, I'll still need your help. The Magecraft of the Inia family is a refined technique that allows the user to accelerate time within their body, or a bounded field, where the spell cannot be interfered with. Even though bounded fields aren't meant to be copied, Spirit Tom Albion is a place where usual rules are bent. I believe your Magecraft can reach its full potential here.
Heartless took out a large jar full of sticky liquid. Floating inside it was a damaged brain with nerves attached, along with a pair of eyeballs. Ceiling-designated mages were stored in this way. So few mages knew this method of preservation. First, the target's brain, nervous system, and magic circuits were immersed in a special kind of liquid. The jar containing this liquid would then act as a body or an exoskeleton, Of all the projects Heartless had undertaken in the past 10 years, finding the mage responsible for sealing away other mages had been among the most costly. He said, taking off his watch, which had already stopped. It had been connected to his spell, precisely calculating time across tens of thousands of years in units of centuries. It was indispensable to the success of this operation.
Is this where I die?
There is no guarantee that our goal will be reached. Both of us are currently defenseless. Don't you think this is too risky a gamble?
Well,
Faker did not reply. However, her thoughts were made clear by the slight tremble of her lips. She had already completed her task as a crucial component in Heartless' plan. With a troubled smile, Heartless gave a nod.
Be sincere, hopefully, we will make it.
Sincere, he spoke as if uttering a prayer, or singing a low song of praise. Heartless watched as Faker was slowly swallowed by a pillar of light, accompanied by the glow of the ancient dragon's magic circuits. The ancient Macedonian warrior who had seen countless battles closed her eyes, as if she was gently settling into a nap.
Good night, Faker.
good night, Heartless.
Heartless was the only one to hear her final words before the hands of the clock above her began to turn, signalling the beginning of her transformation. We fell for what felt like an eternity through patches of meaningless emptiness. Apart from the walls of the hole, everything was darkness. It almost seemed as if the world had evaporated away. Though my ears had already stopped registering the whooshing noise of the wind and my skin had become dull to its chill, the fear I felt coursed through my veins. Without it, I would have lost my sanity in minutes. Of course, it was all very strange. Since Albion didn't exist within the coordinate planes of reality, it could extend tens of kilometers underground. But would such a fall really take this long? My body told me that we had already been descending for several hours now. Out of fear of hitting the ground, I constantly enhanced my vision. Even though the wings of Icarus could control the speed of our descent, it couldn't possibly last this long. I could tolerate this thanks to the gravekeeper training I had underwent and my brief stay at the clock tower. Luvia, Sagan, and Flu were also fine, of course. Even my mentor was doing all right, because this task didn't require much skill at magecraft. All it required was the willpower to endure seemingly endless freefall into darkness. Our descent was mostly uneventful, except for the times when the pit of oblivion suddenly changed direction, or became narrower. Having to control the mystic code every time a change in course happened was the most nerve-wracking part.
Don't waste your stamina. Try and automate the process with your nervous system rather than using your brain. It might be easier to relax and leave it to your instincts and add.
Are you okay with that, Ad?
He, of course! I can't get tired after all.
For now, I wouldn't question him. The fatigue that had built up as we trekked through Albion was indeed eating away at my body. Though they hadn't said anything about it, it must have been the same for Luvia, Sagan, and Flu. Even if I used my magic circuits to automate the gliding process, the cold air still ruthlessly tore away chunks of my stamina. It was even more tiring than usual because of the strange magical energy present in Albion. Though it was possible to regulate body temperature with magecraft, we all chose to conserve as much magical energy as possible. Speaking of which, I wonder if time actually passes here. My mentor's words reminded me of what Sakei had said in my dream about time and space being fuzzy here. Either way, we needed to reach our destination in time for the grand roll. Suddenly, my mentor fell silent.
No, that's not right. Maybe...
What have you discovered, sir?
I think I finally found the piece that I was missing.
I didn't understand what he meant by that. I didn't really mind, though. I couldn't always see the same truth as he could. I was satisfied with being able to help even the tiniest bit. Dr. Heartless. The recounts of his students and past acquaintances painted the picture that reminded me of my mentor. It was something beyond his being the former head of the Department of Modern Magecraft. I found the two of them similar in a more fundamental way. Though they lacked the proper mentality of a mage, for instance, they both acted in a bizarrely magecraft-like way. Would my mentor really be able to stop someone like Heartless? Even if he couldn't, I hoped that meeting Heartless would help my mentor resolve some of his internal conflicts. Surely this journey to Albion was also for this purpose. After falling some more, Luvia broke the silence.
Observe it! The air has changed again. She reached out to the 5 gems that floated beside her. My gemstones tell me that we are entering a new region of Spirit Tomb, Albion.
She looked down, tossing her gaze into the depths.
We are about to reach the ancient heart.
That was our target, the deepest part of Albion, where Heartless would be performing his magecraft. At this, my mentor let out a low moan.
Oriad, are we too late?
Which I've just established a connection with Rhines. It's starting a few hours earlier than I expected. This is terrible.
His response sent us all into a momentary silence. Luvia was the first person to recover from the shock.
That means the seal separating the ancient heart has been broken?
So, before I could finish my sentence, I noticed it too. My mentor had told me that the deepest part of Spirit Tomb Albion was sealed away by an incredibly strong lock in order to keep away all outside interference. The dam was only breached when a grand roll was being held. A sudden change in the air could only mean one thing.
The grand roll is about to begin.
Chapter 3, Part 2.
Worried, I could feel my heart thudding in my chest as I walked through the portal in the mining city again. If it weren't for the grand roll, I would never have set foot in that place again. Though I hated the mining city, I had to admit that it was special. The air made it so that my skin was numb, and my bones felt like they had been punctured. To be precise, it was because of the strange pressure here. Although no scientific instrument would be able to detect the source of this pressure, any regular scientist to set foot here would have the same fate as a finch in a mine full of poisonous gases. Worried, even I was at danger of being crushed by it. To the people of the modern age, magical energy from the Age of the Gods was basically a poison. Unfortunately for me, the magical energy here was infinitely close to that of the Age of the Gods. Ever since I arrived here, my mystic eyes had been burning with pain more intense than I had ever felt. There was more to this place than its age, though. It was also like a separate history unaffected by the texture of the human order. Had humans not separated from the gods, then perhaps the rest of the world would have looked like this, too. I was now approaching the ancient heart of Spirit Tomb Albion, the greatest asset of the clock tower. I had never actually thought about whether or not it was the shape of a heart. After the dragon had died, its corpse had become many times larger, so how big was this area? I couldn't tell what the walls that surrounded me were made of. I only knew that they were black and shiny in a way that was unlike metal or organic matter. The floor and ground were also made of the same material. Yes, the time had come. I felt a slight tingle in my magic circuits. Rains? Oh, so you really made it. I took great care to stop my face from reflecting my thoughts. Up until now, I had still been in doubt about whether or not it was possible to get here in time for the clock tower to unseal the ancient heart. However, even though the dam was no longer in place, the ancient heart was still a bastion meant to shield us from outside interference. The only reason why I could communicate so clearly with my brother, despite his second-rate abilities, was that he was close by. Worried. Unfortunately, we were still too late. At least we've reached the ancient heart. I got all excited for nothing. You know that the meeting has been moved forward by 4 hours, right? I predicted that that would happen. I'll try my best to work around it. My brother's thoughts made his worries clear. I felt the exact same way. If only Of course, if I allowed myself to do that, I would have to accept an early death by poisoning or suffocation. Worried anyone unfortunate enough to be standing downwind in the clock tower would become the target of a rain of arrows. I had no desire to return to the state I had been in following Canis' death before I named my current brother Lord El-Melloi II. Did you meet Giroff? Yes, he gave me your note. That old man had passed my brother's message to me. It would have been so much more interesting if he was present at the grand roll, but he had adamantly refused my offer. Determined at the rightness from now on? Yes, I know. My job is to buy as much time as possible until you stop Heartless, right? I'll try my best as well. I momentarily silenced the telepathic link between us and walked along the fissure in silence, with only my shadow for company. It was said that the greater magic circuit were like the blood vessels in a human body. In the ancient heart, however, the circuits formed a helix. Soon, the space widened into a spacious room lit by a pool of the same spiraling light. Its magnificent glow ebbed and surged, telling me that I had arrived at the chosen place. It was uneven as it spread, pooling in some places and meandering away from others. In the darkness of the deep abyss, the light was like stars in the sky of a new world. In the center of the room was a round table also made of an unknown material. Evidently, it had not been brought here from the surface. Since the day the clock tower was formed, how many grand roles had been held here between the darkness and the light? How many mages had drank from the goblets of victory because of the results while others cried out in despair? The meeting's attendees had all arrived. To my left were the lords of the Democratic faction, Inarai Veluwaleta Troholm and McDonald Trambulio Elrod. To my right were the Lord and Lord representative of the aristocratic faction, Ruflius Nuatha Ray Elephas and Olga Mariasmite Animosphere. No members of the neutral faction were in attendance, so the seats across from me remained empty. In this situation, facing an empty seat was just as scary as facing a lord. The neutral faction's absence did not indicate their disinterest. Rather, their so-called neutral stance meant that they tended to stay put until an opportunity arose. Instead of actively fighting for dominance, they usually stood on the sidelines, pulling the strings of the other factions under the pretense of research. Of course, I had to sit on the right. Disregarding Olga Mary's suggestion for now, we were members of the aristocratic faction. If we chose to switch factions, no number of lives would be enough to keep me alive.
The preparations are complete.
It's good to see some new faces. I've gotten bored of seeing the same old attendees every time. Although we are mages, it's good to replace the old with the new once in a while. By that logic, Ruflius and I should be the first to go.
The thought of Inarai retiring was funnier than her joke. I couldn't imagine anyone less likely to back down than her. Lord Valuileta had taught Tuko Azaki, the grand-ranked mage. That alone was proof that she was not just any mage. Observant came the response of the oldest among us, an old man with wrinkles only rivaled in depth by the marks carved into his soul. In fact, considering that he was the lord of the Department of Spiritual Evocation, it wouldn't be out of the question for him to actually have spells engraved upon his soul. Inarai and Ruflius. From the perspective of their departments, Inarai and Ruflius were on equal standing.
My father entrusted me with the votes of the Department of Astromancy. I hope that does not offend you.
Worried. Oh no. She was probably more comfortable here than I was. I felt the situation become even less favorable for me as I was robbed of my privileges as the youngest member. The lords all turned their gazes towards me. This was why I hated going last. Even if it was just a coincidence, I would have to be extra careful with what I said.
I took a deep breath.
I am honored to have the privilege of being here. Please excuse my immaturity. I kept my salutation short and took a seat with as polite of a smile as I could muster. Ouch, my stomach ached. Alas, the affliction had spread to me as well. My blood was ice cold and I felt like my nerves were being filed. I couldn't tell whether all of this was due to my anxiety or a curse. All I could do was try to swallow my fear and enhance my brain as much as possible.
Well then, let the grand roll begin.
To be honest, my tactic was horrible for a very simple reason. The data on mining operations in Albion had been released by the Trombelios, which made their accuracy questionable, to say the least. This made it harder for me to predict and delay his actions. I would need to chase after and wrangle over every claim he made. I needed to latch on to even the tiniest foothold. If I lost my footing here, I would never be able to stand up again.
Actually, I have someone I would like to introduce before we begin.
MacDonald looked to the side, and a dark-skinned woman walked into the light. I had known that there was a person standing there, but it had been too dark to see her face.
I am Ashara Mistress from the Materials Branch of the Arcane Dissection Division.
Though I tried to stay silent, a gasp still escaped my mouth. She was Heartless' last student who had gone missing after either Kloof Ithrid or Jorik Kurdice was killed.
I'm sure everyone is already aware that the subject of the meeting is the redevelopment of Spirit Tomb Albion. Yes, I've called her here to represent the Arcane Dissection Division as its opinion is indispensable. Also, To avoid further confusion, I'm telling you all that she is my adopted daughter.
What? Holgamari silenced herself before she could finish her exclamation. This was also a surprise for me.
McDonald had an adoptive daughter in the Arcane Dissection Division. What the heck? It just gets more and more complicated. I've heard that McDonald has tens of daughters. Both of our anxiety was made clear through our conversation.
Of course, the division doesn't exclusively provide me with information. That would only overcomplicate things, wouldn't it?
Worried, McDonald looked happy, but I found it hard to sympathize with him. There was simply no chance for us to win like this. Then again, that was probably the impact he wanted his first attack to achieve, especially since Olga Mary's attachment to the aristocratic faction was not very strong. If he broke through from there, he could easily end the meeting. I started seriously considering using flattery to attempt to prolong my life as I peered at Ruflius, who was clenching the arms of his chair with his withered fingers. This was a problem. If I turned my back on the faction I belonged to now, he might explode and kill me without regard to the meeting. I didn't trust the others to protect me at all, especially since they could be heartless accomplices.
If the topic is truly the redevelopment of Spiritum Albion, as I have heard,
She probably also felt the tension rise. Even if she planned on betraying Ruflius and agreeing to redevelop Spiritum Albion, she couldn't ignore McDonald.
You are not mistaken. I sure.
Yes, Father? Pardon me, Lord Trembelio.
At McDonald's instruction, Ashara placed a few sheets of paper onto the table before us. Though she was technically a representative from the Arcane Dissection Division, she acted more like McDonald's secretary. Of course, it was to remind us of their relationship. It was also why she deliberately called him her father and then corrected herself.
Lord Inarai Valuoletta, I have prepared detailed information on Spiritum Albion as per your request.
Thank you, McDonald.
Inurai picked up the files and inspected them carefully. Chapter 3, Part 3, cast by Artel Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening.
While the rest of us followed suit, McDonald scanned the room. His eyes rested upon Ruflius for a while, before passing over Olga Mary and myself. It was appropriate, given our difference in age and prestige. I couldn't find a single flaw in his actions, which annoyed me.
Forgive the fact that it is written on modern printer paper. That is the Arcane Dissection Division style. As the data indicates, the amount of talismans excavated from Albion has continued to decrease in recent years. If we are to continue to maintain the clock tower, this fact must be taken into consideration. At this rate, mystery will decrease, along with the possibility that we mages will reach our goal.
By that, of course, he meant the route, our purpose, the proof of our existence, and our final destination.
In other words, we will lose the purpose of our existence if this trend continues.
That sentence demanded to be taken seriously, especially since it was being said by one of the most important people in the clock tower, Lord Trembelio. Lord Eliphas was probably the only person in the world capable of contending with its power. After all, he was the central figure in opposition to the redevelopment of Albion.
McDonald's stocky build was reflected in the old man's dark, glassy eyes.
Maintaining the clock tower, you say? What exactly are you trying to maintain?
Futurist mages, of course.
How foolish. The clock tower is our domain.
He tapped his knuckles on the gems on his chest. Though he acted arrogantly, it seemed well justified.
Arrogant if we do not have enough talismans. We should reduce the number of new ages. If we still do not have enough, we should dispose of useless branch families. There was never a need to spend so many resources on the redevelopment of Albion. The others do not matter. They will never reach the essence of mystery. Your wasteful plan will harm the entire clock tower. I will not allow us to be known for such stupid acts.
Analytical from his perspective, this was the obvious solution. To the aristocratic faction, everyone else was subservient and replaceable. Though I saying that, he wasn't wrong. The Democratic faction also valued people based on inborn talent. They accepted new Agers not out of kindness, but because there weren't enough mages in the modern world to provide them with human labor. The old man was simply advocating that we ought to carry through with this philosophy.
If we are discussing our future,
Just as he was about to continue, he looked to the side. Though he didn't look shocked or even mildly surprised, neither him nor Lord Trambellio would have been able to predict this turn of events.
What's going on?
It didn't take long for the interruption to show itself.
Apologies for interrupting your meeting.
Observant the new arrival, a woman dressed in an elaborate furizode said as she adjusted her glasses. I was reminded again of a beautiful snake that watched over the clock tower with ice-cold eyes.
Adashino Hishiri.
To my surprise, Inorai was the one who had called her name.
It has been a while, Lady Inorai.
Questioning. I didn't expect someone from the Department of Law to be here. Are you here to represent Lord El-Melloi?
No, this time I am acting as a guide.
A guide?
The old woman said, her frown shifting to a wry smile. Someone else appeared behind Hishiri. It was another person who did not fit in among lords. On second thought, considering that this was a grand role, it made sense that she would be here.
Oh, you're here as well, teacher. It seems like I wasn't too late.
The East Asian woman that Hishiri led here said with a slight nod. Chapter 3, Part 3.
저는 the meeting already started?
I didn't know exactly what she had done to make Ruflius hate her, but I knew that the Grand Mage was particularly skilled at gathering hate and jealousy.
Someone like you has no place here.
Miss Taha is at your way of greeting people. Lord of the Department of Spiritual Evocation, Elifis. Sorry, but I have the right to be here today. I know you might have a hard time accepting it because of your age, but my presence is in accordance with tradition.
Right? What right?
At this, the old man froze. Tuco was holding an old piece of parchment with a signature on it. Ruflius understood its meaning immediately.
It seems that you 된다. I am here to represent the role.
On behalf of the Department of Law, I can vouch for its legitimacy.
A moment of heavy silence ensued, not because it was impossible, but precisely because it was the opposite. Everyone present could grasp that the Grand Puppeteer was capable of something as frightening as this.
You always get hired for the strangest jobs.
Mamise, isn't that because of your influence, Miss Inare?
Though Tuco was her student, Inorai had been the first person to agree to her sealed designation. That was the nature of student-teacher relations among mages.
Which family did this?
The Department of Classes, Jingmari. In fact, you could call me the representative of the entire neutral faction. I had the authority to do this. Grand role, don't no worry. I only have the vote of one family, not the entire faction. Even if I were given so many votes, you still wouldn't approve of it, would you?
Tuco leisurely took one of the chairs beside her. Though it had been made for the lords, the Grand Mage sat down as if there was nothing special to it.
You actually did it?
Of course I did. In any case, we needed an element of uncertainty. Someone who had absolutely no chance of working with Heartless to figure out the identity of his accomplice, don't we? Analytical, before I departed from Slur Street, I had requested something from Tuco, or rather, the faction which had commissioned her in secret. Though the neutral faction usually chose to watch from the sidelines, even they found it hard to ignore the fact that Heartless snuck into Spirit Tomb Albion using a portal hidden beneath the Department of Modern Magecraft. That was why they had given in to Tuco's taunts despite their usual attitude toward politics. Even so, I hadn't expected them to send Tuco as their representative.
How long have you known that Miss Tuco was searching for Heartless's students at the request of the neutral faction?
Actually, half of it was my intuition. Analytical, it would be nice if I could look good as well as be right, but I'd have to worry about that later. Evidently, it hadn't been the work of the aristocratic faction. Though the Department of Law could commission Tuco at the cost of not giving her another sealed designation, she wasn't trustworthy in the least. If it had been McDonnell or Inorai, their request would have been more discreet. They would have avoided contact with us at all costs for fear of leaking information. With such a delicate balance of interests, Tuco wouldn't have been set free to do whatever she wanted. By process of elimination, that left only the neutral faction. Even though they didn't want to directly interfere in the grand role, they still needed information. Toko was a reasonable choice, considering that she had already been involved with Heartless in the Elsema case. I didn't expect Hishiri Adashino to be here as well, though. As I thought this, the mage behind Tuco smiled. She then moved to stand behind Lord Trembelio in a similar position to Ashara, Heartless's last student. It was a place where she could stay hidden and wait for the perfect moment to strike. Analytical as a freelancer who did what she wished, Toko Azaki held no power in the clock tower. From one perspective, her presence was worthless because she had no one to back her up. From another perspective, however, she was a formidable opponent even among the elites of the clock tower. Most of the lords gathered here only achieved the rank of Brand, one rank below Tuco. As Albion related so deeply to the future of mages, all three factions held a stake in it. As such, it would be hard to dismiss Tuco's opinion. Toko disrupted the premise of this meeting. Basic politics could not be applied to this grand role anymore.
Let us continue the conversation that we were having just then, Mr. Ruflius.
With a wave of her pale hand, someone interrupted before Ruflius could respond.
Enough of this stuff. That will make me fall asleep.
Wait!
Tuco shrugged as Olga Mary stared up at her in disbelief.
Mamius, this is just another boring fight between the aristocratic faction and the democratic faction, isn't it? Another argument about whether or not the clock tower should expand and allowing more new others. I'm sick of hearing your two opinions over and over again. I went all the trouble coming here. I want to hear something new. Dash, you must nearly be ready by now, right? El-Melloi?
What are you talking about?
Pauco failed to hold back a laugh at my response.
Don't play dumb. Since you're here, and you still have a refreshing look of determination in your eyes, you must have reached one of the truth.
Hey, brother.
Yes, I know. Dash back at Slur Street. She told me that she was looking forward to the denouement.
Canoid, what an arrogant thing to say. She had essentially told us that her own enjoyment should come before the fate of the entire clock tower. I had no doubt that she thought this way. Tuko Eozaki was not the kind of person who would be interested in political drama. The trends of the world of magecraft over millennia failed to pique her curiosity. She wasn't here to represent the neutral faction, but to find out the truth about the case that she had become involved in.
You probably also noticed that she was addressing both of us.
I annoyed Cupper Core she knows we're communicating using magecraft. I wasn't trying particularly hard to conceal it, but it still made me a little unhappy that she saw through it in a single glance. What could I say? This was Tuko Azaki, after all. Worried there was a limit to how much I could joke around, I must reiterate that Ruflius was perfectly capable of killing me if he wanted to, even though I was technically part of his faction.
Should I use Trimall to create a scale model of you again, like last time?
I had put Trimau into a briefcase so she wouldn't attract so much attention. Since my brother was the detective, he should be the one doing the grand reveal.
No! How am I meant to convince the other lords of my reasoning like that, especially since I'm already missing from the grand role?
That made sense. The grand role was only held in a place so hard to access because its authority had to be indisputable. Several greater magic formulae had been performed here before. Though they might not have involved actual magecraft, the repetition of anything on such a large scale was essentially a curse. For example, while the Catholic Pope is being elected, all of the candidates are not allowed to leave the Sistine Chapel. That made the selection process dangerous, as many cardinals were incredibly old. Why? Because tradition and authority were just different words. What should we do then?
How about you do it?
I froze at my brother's words. Though I was trying to keep myself from crying out, something still slipped from my mouth. What? What do you mean, brother?
You should do it, Rains.
You're not joking, are you?
I'm serious.
Amuso, what's the matter, El-Melloi?
I had no doubt that she could tell that something had just been imposed upon me. I think it's in danger. Worried, of course, I was 100% bluffing. Bluffing while standing on a tightrope was a subject I graduated from when I was in kindergarten.
I'll provide you with my deductions in the right order. You can say it in your own words as you sort them out.
What the hell are you thinking? But that elements and yelled my heart out right now if it weren't for the people around me who would relish every mistake I made. I would have done exactly that. No matter how I phrased it, not all the people present would pay attention to my brother's reasoning. They would doubtlessly try to intervene to make the answer more beneficial to themselves. Though Heartless's students were related to this grand role, it wasn't meant for tracking down a perpetrator. Even though I couldn't make them all listen, I needed to make at least half of the attendees interested. On top of that, I needed to thread my brother's reasoning into a logical story that would make the identity of the culprit clear. You might as well have asked me to shoot down a fighter plane while performing acrobatics. Have you caught up with Heartless yet?
Not yet, but soon.
I don't want to give you any extra pressure, but please, hurry. Even if I manage to smoke out his accomplice, it won't matter if you don't stop him. Revealing the identity of the accomplice could cause the grand roll to fracture, sending the clock tower into chaos. It wasn't unlikely that people would rush to support him. Stopping Heartless was our goal. This meeting was just a mountain we had to climb to reach it.
I clenched and unclenched my hands, making up my mind.
I suppose I should start from here. Does everyone present know of Dr. Heartless, the former head of the Department of Modern Magecraft?
Unfortunately, I've only heard of him because he left the clock tower before I was old enough to remember him.
I didn't know why his name would appear here, or if Olgamari's frown was genuine. Either way, I continued speaking, carefully choosing my words from the thoughts that my brother passed to me. In the past few months, his students have been disappearing one by one. Mrs. Shara, you already know this, especially since your colleague Kaluf Izred was murdered not long ago. Hishiri Adashino can testify that such a murder occurred.
Hishiri nodded. I couldn't be sure of her motivations either. Did it have something to do with the fact that Heartless was also an adopted child of Norwich?
I believe that Dr. Heartless was the culprit.
Oh, really?
Is something the matter?
No, I was just a little surprised. I thought he was quite close with his students.
Great. Another troublesome testimony was just what I needed. I knew nothing about what Heartless was like 10 years ago. Back then, I never could have dreamt that I would become the heir.
Questioning, did you know the former head of the Department of Modern Magecraft? Well, what do you think, Ruthless?
Why would I waste my time on a department head who wasn't even a lord?
The old man answered his question tersely. His way of thinking had probably stayed constant for the past century. The Department of Modern Magecraft back then was not part of the aristocratic faction, so he had no reason to care about it.
Why would I know anything about pointless fights between new ages? Are you trying to waste our time, El-Melloi?
No, Lord El-Melloi. I promise it's related to the topic at hand. I finally understood my brother's thoughts on him. Damn this old idiot. I wanted to feed him to some dogs. He wasn't even trying to understand what I was saying. Regardless, there was no use trying to avoid it. It was time. Someone at this meeting is Heartless's accomplice.
Hey, how's the meeting going over there?
My mentor was too busy to reply. Though I didn't know the details, I could tell that it wasn't going well from his ever-deepening frown. Segan approached my mentor.
Lord El-Melloi II. Do you mind if I connect your magic circuits?
Feel free.
Observant with a nod from my mentor, Segan gestured with his fingers, creating a sigil the shape of a wing that shone like magic circuits. The situation in the meeting room suddenly came flooding into my mind. What is that?
Ashbourne's intelligence sharing magica. I guess you could say it's mainly about to manipulate magical energy. But this technique also involves the sharing of magic.
I think I could understand this. The Mage of the Castle of Separation invented a way to fuse many magic crests together to overcome the problem of incompatibility. From the way Segan's personality was eroded by the magic crest, I had the impression that this technique was dangerous and invasive. However, he was saying that it was actually about sharing.
His magic lives on inside me.
Though Segan sounded a little sad, we were all preoccupied with the information that we had just received.
He never expected Tuko Aozaki and Hishiri Adashino to attend the Grand Roll.
I was similarly surprised. Though I knew the Grand Roll was no ordinary meeting, even the lords seemed to be surprised at the presence of the renowned Tuko Aozaki, who I had met before. The thought that she was in the same room with others who were to decide the fate of the clock tower sent shivers up my spine.
Hey!
Her face was filled with a tension that I had not seen on her before. Was she nervous because she was the only one here who could understand the true gravity of the situation? I was a second slower than her to realize that one of the gemstones surrounding her had found something.
The time has come.
Shouting led. Me.
He threw a knife into the darkness. It was not meant to pierce the enemy, but rather to divine the safest future. We immediately understood, staggering in the direction of the knife. A heartbeat later, we were hit by a truly terrifying shock. Like a hammer through tissue paper, black lightning tore through the defenses we had carefully prepared and sent air whooshing upward. It burned away the darkness, sending us spiraling out of control.
Shout him through,
Bandin.
answered Flew, clutching his injured arm. He had used it to protect his mystic code. If he lost the wings now, he would fall to a fearsome death.
A dragon?
It was the skeleton of a dragon. No, it was more than that. My mentor's eyes were wide as he stared at the chariot pulled by two skeletal dragons. There was familiarity in his expression, as if he had rode in the chariot before.
Gordian wheel. No, Hecatic wheel.
It was the chariot that Faker had used on the rail Zeppelin, which had once been used by her king. A noble phantasm whose name echoed proudly in ancient battlefields.
Amused, so Heartless knew of this place too, huh? I reckon I should thank the old man for finding a path that takes us to the heart.
That made sense. Since Heartless hadn't taken the portal in the clock tower meant for taking attendees of the grand roll into the heart, he could have taken the same shortcut that we used. Moreover, if he anticipated our pursuit, it was only natural that he would place traps. However, I noticed something strange, not about the dragons or the chariot itself. The noble phantasm was missing something that was required for it to activate.
There's no one riding it.
The rider who should have been holding the reins was nowhere to be found.
It's Faker's Magecraft.
Even though I was face to face with the riderless chariot, I still found it hard to accept.
Shouting, "The noble phantasm is driving itself."
The dam has been opened, so he's come. If only I hadn't guessed correctly. No, actually, there's nothing that calms me more than the thought that he understands me.
The hand he had over his eye shone red with the light of his command spells, marks that indicated how many absolute commands he had. Having used one during the incident aboard the rail Zeppelin, 2 remained. Without removing his hand from his eye, he looked to the pillar of light beside him, where his servant was undergoing ascension.
Humanity quelantre years of compressed time had passed. It was not enough, not even close. It took hundreds, no, thousands of years to turn a servant into a divine spirit. Et adopte this process Shadow Ascension. It was a practical application of the ritual used by the people under the domain of the Gravekeeper, intended to recreate King Arthur from her body, mind, and soul, combined with the initiation of the labyrinth. If his Magecraft succeeded in creating a god for Mage, the people of the clock tower would be able to use the same kind of Magecraft as the mages of the ancient past. Of course, certain requirements also had to be fulfilled for the Age of the Gods to continue, but Magecraft infinitely close to the Age of the Gods could be revived. The last thing that stood in his way was the person who could not allow his plan to succeed. It's time to settle this fight for once and for all, Lord El-Melloi II.
Then he turned again to look at the woman floating inside the pillar of light.
Faker. She had come here to be killed, so her king could be revived as a divine spirit. She was a senseless person willing to sacrifice herself after Heartless had told her his goal. Heartless couldn't help but think that she was so similar to himself. For your sake, I will keep my promise.
With his uncovered eye, he looked at the clock once again. It had not been long since they said goodbye to each other, but he already missed her. And then,
Be my command spell, I order you.
as the light from the command spells grew brighter and brighter, Heartless uttered his command.
For me sake, please wait 2,000 years.
Chapter 4, Part 1.
Lord Elithus, the Lord of the Department of Spiritual Evocation, laughed. It made me feel as if the gates to hell had opened, letting a foul wind blow onto my face. In a certain sense, it suited the labyrinth which we were currently in.
A culprit, you say? You must be eager to show off, girl from the Department of Modern Magecraft. It is too late now to take back what you have said.
Confident that's all right, because I don't plan on doing so. The confidence was fake, of course. I was desperate to act like I knew what I was doing. No one would listen to what I said otherwise.
Lord Aelifis glared at me for a few seconds.
It is not worth my time. Continue, MacDonald. This is no place for someone to amuse themselves by playing detective.
I doesn't want me to speak at all. I thought, biting down on my lip. I had expected things to go this way, regardless of whether or not Ruflius was the accomplice. Though it was infuriating, Ruflius's dismissal was perfectly in line with the laws of the clock tower. By that I meant that there was no law forcing people to listen to a detective's reasoning. No matter how excellent of a theory my brother created, it became meaningless if I messed up over here. I had to admit that this was an effective move.
We should not care about the death of a member of the Arcane Dissection Division. The same applies to heartless students. How can we waste the grand roll on such trifling matters?
There is meaning to this.
It came from the only person present who was not seated, the woman standing behind Tuko Arzaki. Ruflius turned to face her, grinding his yellowed teeth.
Hishiria Dashino.
In the name of the Department of Law, I request that the Grand Roll discuss heartless students.
What are you trying to do?
I am simply doing my duty.
With pale fingers, the woman dressed in an elegant vizidode nudged her glasses and scanned the lords and lord representatives before her with ice-cold eyes.
We are obligated to make the greatest effort in maintaining the order of the clock tower. That applies to the Grand Roll as well.
That was why the Department of Law was different from the other 12 departments. Rather than devoting itself to mystery, it existed to make sure the clock tower could operate peacefully.
Question, and what meaning do you think it...
Naturally, I believe that it will impact the outcome of the meeting.
Despite being questioned by 2 lords, her face betrayed no emotion. Even among other members of the Department of Law, it was rare to see someone as courageous as her.
On top of that, this meeting should also aim to gather as many testimonies as possible, except for the testimony of Heartless himself.
Testimonies?
Observant though he had just been complaining about how stupid we were, Ruflius faltered when Hishiri asked him her first question.
Questioning, Lord Aelifis, are you familiar with the name Akiri Zolgan?
Yes, that is the name of a mage who loved to dream.
I believe the clock tower has kept records of his essays on ghost liners.